Hey guys, tonight we begin Immoral Thrones. Tonight, as the world outside your window grows a little quieter, and the sounds of the day begin to soften and fade, we are going to wander, very slowly, into the candlelit halls of the Middle Ages, and visit the lives of a few monarchs whose names became wrapped in tales of greed, betrayal, and cold decisions. Their reputations echo through time as immoral, but we are not here to judge or to stir alarm. We are here to drift through their world like a quiet breeze, noticing the soft glow of torches, the rustle of heavy robes, and the way the stones of their castles held every secret. As you settle in, you might like to lie back, let your shoulders drop, and let your breathing become a little slower, as if you, too, are walking those stone passages at night, hearing the faint echo of footsteps along the flagstones, and the distant murmur of a guard-changing shift at the gate. The monarchs we will meet tonight, kings with restless tempers, rulers with cold hearts, and sovereigns who loved luxury more than fairness, will be seen not in moments of shouting or battle, but in the quiet after, when the choices have already been made, and only the silence remains. Their immorality will appear only as soft suggestions, a harsh decision whispered over a parchment, a tax raised without much thought, a treaty broken with a quiet nod. No sudden cries, no sharp sounds, only the slow, steady rhythm of daily court life. We will listen for the scratching of quills, the clink of coins on wooden tables, and the faint whisper of fabric as courtiers bow and move away. We begin with the simple idea that every ruler, no matter how feared or admired, still walked, ate, slept, and dreamed. The most immoral monarchs of the Middle Ages also had slow mornings, long evenings, and quiet moments at windows, listening to the wind. Tonight, we will slip into those quieter spaces, where even a cruel king listens to rain on the roof, and even a ruthless queen watches a fire burn low and wonders how history will speak her name. We will walk through England under King John, where the air feels close and damp, and nobles whisper about broken promises in draughty halls. We will move to the polished stillness of Philip V's French court, where officials count coins with patient, steady hands. We will slip into the tiled courtyards of Castile, where Pedro the Cruel paces between shadows and moonlight, and we will pass, like observers draped in invisibility, through Italian strongholds where cold-eyed lords decide more with a raised brow than with a raised sword. As you listen, you might imagine the soft crackling of a fire in a stone hearth, the occasional pop of resin in the logs. You might hear the distant toll of a bell from a monastery, somewhere beyond the castle walls, marking another hour in the long medieval night. Let those imagined sounds lull you even further, as if you were lying on a pallet of straw in a corner of the great hall, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket, feeling the warmth of the flames on your face and the cool air on your hands. The kings and queens in this tale are not heroes, and they are not villains in shining colors. They are simply people with more power than wisdom, moving through days filled with ceremony, paperwork, and small decisions that added up to great consequences for others. Tonight, we float above those days, skimming along the surface like a slow-moving cloud, watching without rushing, noticing each detail and then letting it drift away again. As we wander, the night outside will feel longer and quieter, and you may find your eyelids growing heavy, your thoughts slowing and stretching out. If you drift away for a while and miss part of the story, that is perfectly all right. These monarchs have waited centuries. They can wait for you to sleep, and their stories will still be here when you return. So, let the candles be lit in your imagination. Let the doors of the past open on silent hinges, and come walk with these imperfect rulers through their long, medieval nights. A gentle journey among the most immoral thrones, told so quietly that you can fall asleep along the way. Now, take a slow breath in, and a slow breath out, and let the Middle Ages grow very close, and very quiet, around you. But before we dive in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a small gesture that truly helps the channel grow. And I'm always curious to know where in the world you're listening from, and at what time of night. Tonight, the Middle Ages stretch out before you like a long, dimly lit hall. Stone walls rise on either side, cool and unyielding, but the air is gentle and still. Somewhere far away, outside these imagined walls, the night is modern and familiar. But in here, time has slowed. In here, the candles burn with a softer flame, and the noise of the day is a distant memory. You are walking, very slowly, along these corridors of history, where kings and queens once passed in heavy robes, their steps echoing on the same worn stones. In the daylight, these monarchs might appear intimidating. Crowns gleaming, swords at their sides, banners fluttering above their courts. But, as with everyone, night softens their edges. The crown rests on a cushioned stool, the sword leans quietly against a wall, and the roar of the court is replaced by a low murmur, or even silence. The Middle Ages at night are less about battles and proclamations, and more about the gentle routines that continued when the doors were shut. Servants banked the fires. Guards walked their rounds. Cats curled up in warm corners, untroubled by matters of state. These halls have seen many kinds of rulers. Some ruled with a calm sense of duty, trying to balance fairness with necessity. Others, the ones whose stories surround us tonight, ruled with appetites they could not, or would not, restrain. They may have been greedy, grasping for more gold, more land, more obedience. They may have been cruel, letting anger spill into punishment without pause. They may have been indulgent, feasting and celebrating while their subjects struggled. But even they could not escape the simple human truth that, when night fell, everything slowed. Even the most immoral monarch eventually had to sit, to think, and to sleep. The word immoral in the Middle Ages did not just mean breaking the law. It carried the weight of faith, custom, and expectation. A king who taxed too harshly might be called unjust. A queen who favored her own relatives too openly might be whispered about as a corrupter of order. A ruler who neglected their duties in pursuit of pleasure could be condemned as sinful. Yet, while chroniclers wrote sharp words in their manuscripts, life inside the castle continued in small, patient movements, tables set, fires tended, boots mended, horses brushed. This is where we will linger, in the spaces around the judgments. Outside the great halls, there were courtyards filled with the quiet clatter of buckets at wells, the soft chatter of servants sharing a joke under their breath, and the slow tread of cooks bringing in baskets from the kitchens. The same ruler whose name might go down as the cruel or the unjust might pass through these spaces with barely a word, their mind on matters that felt grand and distant, completely unaware of the small acts of kindness or irritation happening a few steps away. It is in these overlooked corners that the Middle Ages feel most human and most calming. If you listen closely, you might imagine you can hear the faint jingle of a bridle or the hushed sound of a stable door closing. A man-at-arms might be oiling his mail shirt, the soft, repetitive motion almost like a lullaby. In the kitchens, the last pots are scrubbed with sand and water, the ashes raked smooth under the oven. A sleepy apprentice baker might be preparing dough that will rise slowly through the night, ready for bread at dawn. Around them all, the stone walls stand, as they have for decades or centuries, holding the memories of every laughter and argument, every feast and scolding, every unfair decree and every quiet apology. Inside the private chambers of monarchs, the atmosphere is heavier but no less intimate. Thick curtains block out drafts and prying eyes. Carpets and tapestries soften footsteps, turning each movement into a faint whisper. A table might be scattered with documents, lists of taxes, oaths of loyalty, messages from faraway lands. Nearby, on a stand, rests a crown, looking almost peaceful in its stillness. The person who wears it has the power to punish or to pardon, to take or to give. Yet, tonight, they might simply be sitting beside the bed, loosening their belt, unfastening a brooch, letting the day fall away piece by piece. Some of these rulers will be remembered, in the chapters to come, for doing things that hurt people, overtaxing the poor, seizing lands on flimsy pretexts, breaking sacred oaths, or ordering punishments that echoed down through families for years. Yet even these choices, when seen from within the night, seem strangely quiet. There is no shouting in this story, only the scratch of pen on parchment as a decree is signed, or the soft rustle of a seal being pressed into warm wax. The harm may travel far, but the moment of decision might be as still and gentle as the one you are in now. In another part of the castle, far from the royal chamber, a servant winds slowly up a staircase carrying a lantern. They do this every night, checking that all the candles are safely out, that no curtain hangs too near a flame, that no door expected to be locked is left ajar. They are not thinking of the morality of their monarch, they are thinking of their own aching feet, of the warmth of their blanket waiting on a simple pallet, of the faint smell of straw and smoke in the room they share with others. Their world is full of small, practical details, and the high questions of good and evil float above like distant stars. When chroniclers later wrote of immoral monarchs, they rarely wrote about these servants, or about the way the castle smelled on a cold morning. or how the torches hissed when the rain blew in. They focused on the big decisions, alliances, wars, laws, betrayals. But your mind, as you drift towards sleep, does not need the sharp edges of politics. It can rest instead on the rounded shapes of wooden bowls, the slow swing of a church bell, the even breathing of a dog asleep near the hearth. The kings and queens we will meet are framed by these details, like figures in a painting surrounded by carefully chosen background scenes. There is comfort in knowing that, no matter how dramatic the stories may sound, the days these people lived were, in many ways, ordinary days. The sun rose and set, bread baked, cloaks were mended, children played in courtyards. Even the most feared monarch, for all their cruelty or greed, could not escape the need for food, warmth, and rest. This simple sameness, this slow rhythm of life, runs underneath every tale of immorality like a soft, steady drumbeat. As you listen, you join that rhythm. Tonight, our path will move from one court to another, but always at a slow, unhurried pace. We will never stay too long in the hardest moments, and we will never raise our voices. Instead, we will float from castle to castle like a drifting feather, touching down for a while in England, then France, then Castile, then Italy, and beyond. In each place, we will look for the quietest corners, the softest sounds, and the most soothing images. A royal hand idly tracing patterns on a table, a cat stretching in a window's sunlight, a cloak settling over a bedrail as a tired king finally lies down. In this first part, as we stand in the great hallway of medieval time, you might allow your own thoughts to wander. Perhaps you are not thinking about kings at all anymore. Perhaps you are thinking about the way light falls through your own curtains, or the feel of your own pillow. These thoughts are welcome here. This is a story that does not demand your full attention. It is happy to be a background murmur, a gentle accompaniment to your drifting mind. As the torches in our imagined corridor burn lower, and the night outside the castle walls grows deeper, you may sense that the Middle Ages themselves are beginning to sleep. One by one, the castles close their heavy doors. One by one, the watchman change shifts, their eyes momentarily adjusting from the flicker of fire to the deep black of the countryside. One by one, the last candles in the royal chambers are snuffed out, a tiny thread of smoke trailing upward, dissolving into the darkness. All of history's restlessnesses, for a moment, at rest. You are welcome to rest with it, letting these halls, these servants, these monarchs with troubling reputations become softer and softer shapes in your imagination, until they are just gentle shadows on the inside of your eyelids. The story will continue, but you do not need to follow every step. You can drift in and out, like someone dozing by a hearth while older relatives tell long, winding tales. And now, with this long hall of history stretching behind us, we turn quietly toward the first of our rulers, a king whose name has become a byword for failure and mistrust, and we step silently into his restless kingdom. In the cool hush of an English night, the kingdom of King John lies beneath a low, drifting blanket of cloud. The year could be any time in his troubled reign, somewhere in the early 13th century, when the roads are muddy, the forests thick and deep, and the air along the coast tastes faintly of salt and river mist. Villages have retreated to their timbered houses, shutters drawn, while the last embers glow in open hearths. Above them, on hilltops and by winding estuaries, John's castles keep their patient watch, stones dark against the sky, banners hanging limp in the damp air. Inside those walls, the king whose name will one day be spoken with a sigh of disappointment walks through the quiet of his own uneasy realm. King John's England is not the bright, romantic land of stories about noble knights gathered around a round table. It is a place of negotiations in smoky halls, of damp documents laid out to dry on wooden boards, of nervous nobles and wary clerks. John, small in stature and often described as restless in mind and temper, moves from castle to castle, seldom staying long in one place. His reputation among his lords is already souring, for they see in him a ruler who demands much and gives little, who reaches for money and loyalty with both hands, but lets trust slip through his fingers. Yet for all the harshness of future judgments, the nights of his reign pass in small, human ways, one slow hour at a time. Inside one such stronghold, perhaps along a tidal river where the water laps softly at the stones, John's presence is felt long before he is seen. Servants hurry more quickly, their eyes lowered. Stewards check their tallies twice. A cook worries whether the bread is fresh enough, the meat roasted to the king's liking. The mood is not one of open fear, but of careful watchfulness, like a household that has grown used to sudden changes of temper. Still, the daily tasks go on with their own quiet rhythm, because they must. The realm does not stop for the mood of its monarch. On's immorality, as later writers would come to see it, lies not in a single shocking moment, but in a pattern. Heavy taxes that squeeze his barons and their tenants, arbitrary decisions in disputes, broken promises that leave allies feeling exposed and foolish. In this kingdom, a letter from the king can bring hope or worry in equal measure. A baron summoned to court may spend a long, sleepless ride wondering whether he is being called to favor or to ruin. And all the while, John moves forward, signing, sealing, demanding, calculating. Even when he rests, it seems, his kingdom feels the weight of his uncertainty and hunger for control. Yet for those who serve closely, there are gentler scenes as well. A clerk might notice the way the king drums his fingers restlessly on the table while waiting for an answer, or the way he stares at a map for a long time, jaw clenched, lost in thought. A groom might remember that John, for all his harshness, pauses for a moment to rub the nose of a favored horse, murmuring something soft and indistinct. A page might recall the way he sometimes sits by the fire, boots off, stretching sore feet and sighing like any tired traveler. These tiny glimpses do not erase the damage of his rule, but they remind us that even an immoral king is not made of stone. Beyond the stone walls and royal chambers, John's restlessness seeps into the countryside in quieter ways. Merchants traveling from town to town find new tolls at bridges and gates, small fees that accumulate like sand in a sack. Minor knights and local lords puzzle over conflicting instructions, unsure whether to please the king or maintain old agreements with their neighbors. In village alehouses, where peasants and travelers share benches, people mention the king's name in lowered voices, attached to words like unfair and grasping. Still, life goes on. Crops must be sown, sheep tended, roofs repaired after the winter storms. The discontent is a soft background hum, not yet the roar it will later become. Inside the royal orbit, however, the atmosphere of uncertainty feels sharper. John is not a king whose word is considered secure. Promises made today may be reversed tomorrow if a better offer appears or mood shifts. A baron who believes he has won the king's favor might find, at the next gathering, that another has whispered more effectively, and that his own lands or rights are suddenly in question. This constant shifting of ground breeds suspicion. People watch one another more closely. Alliances become brittle. Smiles in the great hall carry an undercurrent of calculation. At such gatherings, the sound of music and conversation never quite covers the awareness of the king's gaze. When John walks through his court, his eyes move quickly, measuring, weighing, comparing who bows most deeply, who speaks too boldly, who hangs back. He is not a ruler at ease in his own skin or secure in his own power, and that unease radiates outward. It may show in the quick, impatient gesture of his hand when a servant moves too slowly, or in the abrupt questions he throws at a noble about the state of his lands. Some may see these flashes and think them signs of energy, of attentiveness. Others recognize the nervousness beneath. At night, after the whole has quieted, there are still parchments to read and seals to apply. John's clerks bring in rolls of accounts, lists of fines paid, duties collected, ransoms owed. The king bends over them, the candlelight pooling on the page, lips moving slightly as he follows each line. The finances of his realm are tangled, and he knows too well the feeling of shortage and pressure. Debts to pay, campaigns to fund, ships to maintain. The temptation to squeeze more from his barons and their tenants, to treat the kingdom like a purse that can always be tightened, presses on him like a hand on his shoulder. The morality of these demands may not cross his mind as sharply as the fear of running short. Outside this chamber, the sounds of the castle at night are gentle. Somewhere a dog barks once and then settles. The faint clank of a gate chain carries up from the courtyard. In the barracks, men-at-arms roll onto their sides on straw beds, armor stacked nearby, dreaming perhaps of home fields very far from these walls. In a loft above the stables, a groom dozes fitfully, half worried that the king's horses must be perfect at dawn. Life around John flows like a river around a jagged stone. It finds a way to continue, even as the stone shapes its course. John's moral failings, as history will describe them, are often rooted in an inability to trust and to inspire trust in return. This is not something easily seen in a single scene. It reveals itself slowly, in the way barons begin to hold back support, in the way disputes linger unresolved because no one believes a judgment will last, in the way letters from the king are read and then folded away with a small frown. The air of his court carries a faint scent of unease, like smoke that clings to clothing long after the fire has burned down. On some nights, perhaps after a particularly tense day of negotiations, John may find himself awake long after the candles should have been extinguished. He might stand by a window slit, feeling the cold air on his face, listening to the distant rush of a river or the muted hoot of an owl. In these moments, when no one is watching, he is just a man in the dark, wondering how to hold onto what he has and how to regain what has slipped away. The thought that his methods may be hard, unfair, or wounding to others may not come to him in the language of morality. It may simply be swallowed in the anxious calculation of survival. Meanwhile, across England, the consequences of his choices are felt in smaller, quieter ways. A village reeve, responsible for collecting dues, must knock on the doors of neighbors and friends, asking for more grain, more coin, more labor in the Lord's fields. A merchant who has just barely scraped together enough for a journey now finds that an extra toll at a royal bridge will cut deeply into his profit. A minor knight, loyal but not wealthy, struggles to equip himself for yet another call to service. None of these people may see the king face to face, but his decisions tug gently, persistently, at the fabric of their days. In monasteries and churches, too, the sense of unease grows. John's disputes with church authorities, his quarrels over appointments and rights, create ripples that disturb the normally steady rhythms of monastic life. A prior may worry about maintaining good relations with both king and archbishop. A village priest may feel caught between obedience to the crown and obedience to the church. Yet the bell still rings the hours, the psalms are still chanted, and candles are still lit in quiet chapels, where prayers are murmured for the soul of the king, whether he is beloved or resented. In the written records of the time, John's misdeeds often appear as brief lines: fines, confiscations, titles stripped away, lands granted and then reclaimed. Each line is a decision, a moment when the king chose advantage over fairness or pressed hardship onto others for his own ends. Yet within the castle, that same decision might have been accompanied by nothing more dramatic than the quiet nod of his head, the lazy push of a document back across the table to a clerk, the soft thump of a seal box closing. It is strange to think how gently injustice can sound in the room where it is made. As years pass, the strain between John and his leading nobles tightens. Distrust, accumulated over countless small slights and larger betrayals, begins to harden into resistance. Barons who once grumbled in private now speak more boldly among themselves. The king's restlessness, his habit of shifting positions and demanding more, has carved channels of resentment through their patience. In the nights of the early 1200s, under English stars, there are holes where men sit by the fire, staring into the flames, thinking about what might have to change. For now, though, as you lie in the dark and listen to this quiet story, all of that lies in the future. At this moment in our wandering, King John's kingdom is simply a patchwork of fields and forests, rivers and roads, castles and churches, all breathing slowly in the night. The moral judgments that history will later pass are like slowly gathering clouds on a horizon still far away. Within the stone walls, a troubled king beds down in a chamber of heavy curtains and carved chests. Outside, an innkeeper shutters his door. In a distant village, a child rolls over in sleep on a straw mattress. If your eyes are growing heavy, you may let John's restless kingdom become a soft blur in your mind, a landscape of misty roads and lamplit halls, where the details fade until only the gentle shapes of towers and trees remain. The story will go on to Magna Carta, to meetings in fields and arguments under canvas roofs. But for now, we'll linger in this earlier phase, when the unease is still mostly a feeling, a tension in the air rather than words on parchment. And as their voices fade into the crackle of the fire, we step even closer to the heart of John's story, toward a day when barons and king will meet on a river meadow to put his power into writing, and his uneasy conscience into ink and seal. In the soft, grey light of an English morning, the River Thames moves with unhurried patience past meadows and willows, carrying small ripples of history upon its surface. Not far from its banks lies a wide, flat stretch of land called Runnymede, a name that will one day echo with the idea of limits placed upon a king. For now, in your mind's eye, it is simply a quiet field, damp with early dew, the grass bending gently under a faint breeze. Birds stir in the trees along the water. A thin mist clings to the low ground. It is a place that does not look like it is meant for drama. It looks like somewhere cattle might graze, or travelers might pause to rest. Yet it is here that the restless weight of King John's rule will be gathered into a single document, a parchment that will carry both hope and unease. In the months leading up to this gathering, England has been filled with slow, growing tension. Barons who once rode proudly at the king's summons now feel worn and weary. They have endured John's heavy fines, his use of justice as a tool of pressure, his habit of demanding scutage, money in place of military service, again and again. Each summons to court, each royal demand, has chipped a little more from their trust. At first, the complaints were scattered, like small drops of rain on a roof. Over time, they have joined into a steady patter, then into a quiet but unstoppable stream. Now, nobles speak of charters and rights, of ancient customs they believe have been ignored. They no longer wish only to protest. They wish to bind the king's hand with ink, to imagine the shadow of Magna Carta. It helps to picture not just the meadow where it will be sealed, but the many tents and holes where its ideas are slowly formed. In a baronial hall in the countryside, fire crackling in a wide hearth, a cluster of men sit together, their cloaks drawn close, murmuring over copies of older documents and lists of grievances. Their talk is not furious. It is measured, deliberate, tired. They speak of wardships granted unfairly, of debts called and without mercy, of heirs and widows caught in the king's demands. Each story adds another thread to a growing fabric of resistance. While these conversations unfold, King John moves through his own spaces of council. In royal chambers hung with tapestries, he sits with his advisors and clerks, the air thick with wax and the faint smell of damp wool. They speak of baronial unrest, of letters sent and not fully answered, of rumors that certain lords are gathering forces. Their words circle around questions of strength and concession. How far can the king bend without breaking? How much can he promise without losing the freedom he prizes? John is not a man who enjoys being cornered. The thought of being compelled to sign away any part of his authority surely grates against his pride. Yet he also knows the cost of outright refusal. In such meetings, the sounds are gentle, the soft crinkle of parchment, the tap of a ringed finger on the table, the murmur of Latin phrases quoted from earlier royal charters. Even here, where the fate of the kingdom's balance is being considered, there is no shouting, only low, insistent conversation. Clerks stand by with quills ready, their eyes moving between the king and his counselors, waiting to see which way the wind of royal will is blowing. They are not concerned with morality either. They are concerned with clarity, with how to shape words that will hold across years and disputes. Outside these rooms of planning, life continues in its usual patterns. Messengers ride along muddy tracks, cloaks snapping lightly in the wind. Somewhere on a country lane, a rider carrying news of forthcoming talks between king and barons slows to let his horse drink from a shallow stream. In a small village, distant from great politics, someone hears the sound of hooves and looks up from mending a fence, watching the messenger pass with mild curiosity, unaware that the parchment in the rider's pouch holds the seed of a document that will be remembered for centuries. In towns, the whispers spread more quickly. Merchants, always alert to changes that might affect their tolls and trade, share fragments of news over cups of ale. The barons are angry. There will be a meeting. The king must promise them something. No one speaks yet of a great charter in the terms future ages will use. They only know that something is unsettled, that powerful men are drawing lines they had not dared to draw before. This knowledge settles over the kingdom like a thin, invisible veil. Most people cannot see it, but they can sense it, in the slight edge to their lord's voice, in the unusual quiet of a noble household where plans are afoot. On the river itself, small boats carry food, charcoal, and other supplies toward the place where camps will soon rise. To the boatmen, Runnymede is simply a useful landing spot. They have pulled their craft up on its shores many times before. They note with mild interest the extra activity, the sight of more riders on the road, more tents being raised near the water's edge. But they are preoccupied with tying the right knots, with keeping their cargo dry, with earning the small coins that will feed their families. The great currents of law and authority move around them as quietly as the river's own flow. In the king's mind, the thought of meeting his barons under compulsion must rub raw against his sense of kingship. A medieval monarch, especially one raised in a world of oaths and hierarchies, is taught that he rules by right, by bloodline, by divine favor, by long custom, to be pressed, cornered, and made to yield on points of justice and custom feels, to such a person, like a personal humiliation. John has already known defeats abroad, particularly in his struggles to hold onto lands in France. Now he faces the prospect of being forced into a different kind of surrender at home. It is a bitterness that may only deepen the impulses that led to this moment: suspicion, harshness, and a clinging need to control. Yet, at the same time, there is a curious gentleness about the tools that will be used that day: parchment, ink, wax, and words. No sword can carve letters into a charter. No shout can fix the boundaries of feudal obligation as effectively as a line of text. The Baron's resistance is not only a matter of mustered knights and drawn bows. It is also a matter of clauses carefully written, of phrases like by the lawful judgment of his peers, and according to the law of the land, which, while you lie here in the quiet, float past as soft, almost lulling sounds. They are the vocabulary of limits, the language of restraint. As the day of sealing approaches, tents rise at Runnymede in growing clusters. The king's pavilion, rich but practical, stands not far from the river, its fabric walls gently rippling with the breeze. Around it, lesser tents for clerks, guards, and attendants form a small village of canvas. On the opposite side of the meadow, baronial banners mark the positions of those leading the resistance, their own encampment alive with men-at-arms, pages, and squires tending horses. Between these two clusters lies a strip of open ground, the space where agreement will be shaped. The day itself, when it comes, is not a clash of steel but a convergence of wills. King John, dressed in garments that remind all present of his status, arrives in state, though perhaps with a stiffness in his bearing. The barons, in mail and cloaks, gather with their own quiet determination. They will not kneel merely to beg. They have come to insist. Yet, from a certain distance, the scene might appear almost ordinary. Men walking, talking, gesturing toward parchments, horses shifting their weight, the glint of sunlight on a helm, the rustle of fabric in the breeze. The monumental nature of the moment lies hidden beneath these soft, everyday sounds. The charter itself is a long, carefully constructed document. Its clauses an attempt to rebalance power between king and realm. It promises that the king will not impose certain feudal payments without counsel of the realm, that justice will not be sold, denied, or delayed, that free men will not be imprisoned or stripped of rights without due process. These phrases may seem formal and distant when you hear them now, lying in the quiet, but in their time, they represent a fragile shield raised against the sharp edges of royal will. To accept them, even temporarily, is for John a concession forced by pressure and fear. And yet, if you listen for the sound of this concession in the moment, it is almost silent. Perhaps all that can be heard is the gentle scrape of a quill as a clerk writes the final lines, or the soft exhale of breath from a baron who has worried for months that this day might never come. There might be a murmur of voices confirming the terms, the near-silent rustle of garments as men shift their weight. Then comes the quiet, ceremonial act, the affixing of the king's seal. The very same seal that has closed so many harsh demands and heavy fines now presses into the wax of a charter meant to restrain such acts. The wax gives way without a struggle, receiving the impression that will travel across the realm. For a moment, there is a sense of resolution, as if a long-held breath has been released. The barons have in their hands a promise, recorded and sealed. The king has, at least outwardly, acknowledged boundaries. But beneath this apparent calm, currents still swirl. John is not a man known for keeping unwelcome promises for long. Even as the ink dries, he may already be thinking of ways to undo or evade the commitments he has just made, seeking allies abroad, letters of support from the Pope, opportunities to divide his opponents. The moral weight of this moment, the question of whether he means what he has signed, remains uncertain. When the assemblies break up and the camps begin to thin, the meadow returns to a more ordinary state. Tents are struck, fires are doused, ashes scattered. Horses are saddled, wagons loaded. The grass bears marks of trampling feet and hooves, but soon the wind and rain will smooth those away. The river continues its slow journey, untroubled by politics. A boat passes, oars dipping rhythmically, the occupants chatting quietly about ordinary concerns. The Grand Charter, freshly sealed, travels out into the kingdom folded and carried by trusted hands, while the land around it resumes the soothing rhythm of birdsong and rustling leaves. For people far from these negotiations, life in the weeks after Runnymede may seem much as it was before. Fields need tending. Children cry, laugh, and fall asleep. In alehazes, the story of the king's new charter begins to spread, growing a little with each telling, but still half understood by many. Some say the king has been forced to obey the law like any other man. Others say the barons have overstepped. Most shrug and return to their work, uncertain how or whether this distant parchment will touch their days. In monasteries, copies are made. Monks sit at their desks in cool scriptoria, carefully reproducing the text, line by line, so that each cathedral and important house may have its own record. As their pens glide across the parchment, the charter's clauses fix themselves into the written memory of the realm. It is a quiet process, unhurried, almost meditative. The monks may think of justice and mercy as they write, or they may simply focus on keeping their letters neat, their columns straight. Yet with each stroke, the idea that the king's power can be described and limited becomes a little more real. For King John, however, the peace is temporary. His nature, his fears, and his habits pull him back toward old patterns. Before long, he will seek ways to have the charter annulled, to regain his unrestrained authority with the backing of powerful allies in the church. In doing so, he deepens the sense that his word cannot be trusted, that his signature and seal do not guarantee his intentions. This unwillingness to honor what has been agreed, this tendency to step back from promises when they no longer suit him, is at the heart of why later generations will see him as a deeply flawed, even immoral, monarch. Yet, as you listen now in the quiet, the moral thunder of such judgments arrives only as a distant rumble. The immediate sensations of John's world are still small and gentle. The feel of wax cooling under his ring, the murmur of barons' voices fading as they ride away, the sound of rain starting to patter softly on the canvas of his pavilion. In the evenings after Runnymede, as the king sits alone or with a few close attendants, he may stare into a half fire as so many others do, his mind circling restlessly around advantage and loss. The fire crackles the same way for him as for a peasant. The warmth on his hands is the same. As the shadow of Magna Carta lengthens across his reign, John cannot fully escape it. The charter is not simply a piece of parchment. It is a symbol lodged in the minds of those who signed it and those who heard of it. It represents a line that, once drawn, can be reinterpreted, reissued, and argued over long after the original is set aside. For the sleepless king, it may feel like a weight pressing on his chest, a reminder that his subjects have dared to say thus far, and no farther. For the barons and, in time, for generations beyond them, it becomes a reminder that even royal power need not be boundless. As you drift deeper into relaxation, you might imagine the meadow at Runnymede long after all these people are gone. The tents have vanished. The banners have rotted away. Cattle graze peacefully where once a king and his barons stood face to face. The river, patient and unconcerned, has flowed past for centuries, carrying leaves, fallen branches, and reflections of the changing sky. The air is quiet, broken only by birdsong and the soft rustle of wind in the grass. The great disputes and fears of that day have become faint echoes in the earth, barely a whisper beneath your own slow, steady breathing. And so, in the gentle light of that imagined scene, the shadow of Magna Carta settles over King John's story, not as a roar, but as a soft, persistent reminder that even the choices of an anxious, grasping monarch can be bounded by parchment and by the quiet resolve of those who have had enough. As the meadow grows still in your thoughts, you may allow your own eyes to grow heavier, knowing that the next chapter of John's troubled rule continues, but that tonight, in this moment, the arguments have ended, the seals have cooled, and the river flows on in peace. Far from the echo of royal councils and the quiet formality of Runnymede, King John's England stretches out in fields, woods, and winding lanes where most people will never see the king's face, yet feel the weight of his rule in 100 small ways. The air in these places smells of damp earth, hearth smoke, and animals. The sounds are the calls of livestock, the chatter of neighbors, the creak of wagon wheels. Hey, immorality does not arrive as a dramatic proclamation. It arrives folded into tax demands, fines, and obligations that press gently but steadily on the backs of ordinary men and women, shaping how much they can eat, what they can repair, and whether they can sleep without worry. In one such village, a reeve, a local official chosen from among the peasants, unrolls a piece of parchment brought down from the manor. The document lists what must be provided, So many measures of grain, so many coins, extra labor days on the Lord's fields, perhaps an additional levy for the king's needs. The reeve traces the lines with a rough fingertip, his brow furrowed. Around him, the villagers gather, anxious but quiet. They do not curse the king by name. Instead, they trade glances filled with that tired understanding that more is being asked again, and that somehow they must find a way to comply. The king is a far-off figure in a stone hole, but his needs trickle down as a very near concern. Whether there will be enough food for winter, whether a roof can be mended this year or must wait. For the small freeholder who owns a few strips of land, the latest demand might mean selling one pig sooner than planned, or delaying the purchase of a new plowshare. For the unfree peasant, bound to the Lord's soil, it might mean more days away from tending his own tiny plot, more evenings spent in the fields when he would rather be home by the fire. No one sees these adjustments as grand events. They are quiet recalculations, done in the mind and felt in the body. A sore back, a thinner stew, a patched cloak worn one more year than is comfortable. These become the physical expression of decisions made in faraway castles by men who count money in heaps rather than handfuls. The manor lord who oversees this village stands between the king and the villagers, and he, too, feels the cost of royal demands. When John calls for scutage, payments in place of military service, or for extraordinary aids to fund his campaigns and debts, the lord must find those sums somewhere. He may cut back on the number of household servants, delay repairing outbuildings, or press his tenants for a little more rent. Each choice shifts the strain downward, like water finding lower ground. In his hall, beneath a painted shield and perhaps a faded tapestry, he sits with his steward, going over tallies by candlelight, muttering about the king's insatiable needs. His complaints are not principled manifestos about justice. They are weary calculations about what can be borne. Merchants, too, feel the tug of royal revenue. Traveling from town to town, they encounter tolls at bridges and city gates, some traditional, some newly imposed. A man leading a string of pack horses loaded with cloth or salt might pass through 3 or 4 collection points in a day, each taking a little bite from his profit. At each gate, a royal or seigneurial officer notes the goods, holds out a hand, and records the payment. The merchant knows that some of this money goes to the upkeep of roads and defenses, but he also knows that much flows upward toward the king's ever-hungry treasury. The morality of it rarely enters the conversation. What matters, in the moment, is whether the journey will still be worth the risk and effort. In market towns, where weekly and seasonal fairs draw people from miles around, the presence of royal authority is felt in charters and fees. A town that has paid for the right to hold a market might find its privileges confirmed or threatened depending on the king's goodwill and need for funds. The mayor and leading burgesses watch the shifting winds of royal policy with a quiet, careful eye. If John demands a new payment for confirming their liberties, they must weigh the cost of refusal against the burden of compliance. The stalls are still set up, bright with cloth, pottery, and baskets of produce, but beneath the cheerful noise of bargaining runs a current of financial anxiety. Churches and monasteries, although often wealthy in land and goods, are not immune to the king's reach. John's quarrels with church authorities, his interference in ecclesiastical appointments, and his occasional seizures of church revenue create long ripples. A monastery that suddenly loses a portion of its income to royal demands must tighten its own belt, buying less salt or wine, perhaps hiring fewer lay workers for its lands. A village priest whose church falls under a lord at odds with the crown may see offerings dwindle as local people worry about being caught in the crossfire. The prayers continue, the bells still ring, but under the steady chant of psalms there is the low, almost inaudible murmur of concern. Will there be enough to maintain the lamps, repair the roof, feed the poor who come to the door? In all of these places, the king's moral character is not debated in grand philosophical terms. Instead, people speak of fairness and unfairness in simple, immediate ways. A farmer might say a tax is too heavy. A widow might complain that a fee for confirming her right to stay in her home is unkind. Their language is the language of lived experience, not chronicles. Later writers, with the full story in view, will call John treacherous, grasping, or unjust. For his contemporaries in the countryside, he is felt as a pressure that lies just beyond the horizon, showing itself in demands and decrees that arrive without his face but carry his authority. At the lower edges of the social scale, those serving in royal or baronial households feel the cost of power in yet another way. When a lord must send more to the king, he may reduce wages or delay payments to servants and hired laborers. A cook might notice that cheaper cuts of meat are ordered. A mason who had hoped for steady work repairing walls or building a new tower may find the project postponed. These changes do not come with fanfare. They arrive as a quiet "not this year" from a steward, as a smaller coin in the hand, as weeks of idleness when one had hoped to be busy. Meanwhile, in royal castles, the machinery that turns these scattered sacrifices into coin for the king runs steadily. Sheriffs and royal officials collect and record, sending tallies up the chain. In a great chamber used for auditing accounts, officials in sober clothing sit behind tables, listening as local officers report what has been gathered. They do not see the thin stew or patched shoes that lie behind some of those sums. They see only numbers, rising or falling, fulfilling or failing to fulfill the king's expectations. If an official comes up short, there may be trouble. If he extracts too much, he risks stirring anger that could one day break into open resistance. Balancing these pressures requires a careful hand, and a tolerance for the quiet suffering such balances impose. Throughout all of this, the landscape itself remains gentle. The fields still glow golden at harvest time. The rivers still reflect the changing sky. The woods still whisper with leaves. The moral sharpness of a king's greed sits oddly against the softness, like a rough stone in the middle of a clear stream. People walk past that stone because they must. They cannot stop the water, but they learn how to step around it, how to endure its chill presence without letting it pull them under. In long, slow evenings, as families gather around their hearths, they talk a little of demands and dues, but speak more of weather, health, and hopes for the coming season. Over time, however, the accumulation of these invisible costs shapes the kingdom's mood. When King John's name is spoken in later years with bitterness, it is not only because of his quarrels with powerful barons or churchmen. It is also because, under his rule, many people felt squeezed, unsettled, and unprotected. The law, which should have been a shield, often seemed like a tool used according to the king's need rather than any higher standard. While you rest and listen, the details of feudal obligations and legal customs may blur, but the feeling of it, of living under a ruler whose choices lean heavily on the vulnerable, remains. In the quiet of the night, imagine a path leading away from one of John's castles, down toward a village where the lamps are few and the air smells of turned soil. Along that path walks a farmer who has just handed over more grain than he can comfortably spare. His shoulders are bowed, his steps slow, but he does not rage. He simply adjusts, as so many do, planning how to stretch what remains, how to keep his family fed. The king in his distant chamber may never think of this man, but the man cannot avoid thinking of the king, even if he does not speak his name aloud. These unseen costs of power, felt in backs that stoop a little more, in purses that jingle a little less, in holes that echo with slightly thinner laughter, are part of why John's memory darkened over time. Chroniclers might record great events and sharp judgments, but below their ink lies the story of countless small burdens, carried in silence. As you lie here, breathing slowly, you may let those burdens drift away like smoke, knowing that the people who bore them are long gone, their hardships dissolved into the soil and sky of a country that has changed many times since. For now, the kingdom sleeps. The reeve has put away his parchments. The merchant has stabled his horses. The steward has locked the chest. Fires burn low. Children, exhausted from play and chores, have curled up under woolen blankets. The king still frets in his chambers, measuring his strength against his needs, but most of his subjects are beyond fretting now, folded into the deep, dreamless rest that follows a day of honest fatigue. The costs of his power have been paid for one more day. Tomorrow, perhaps, there will be new demands, or perhaps only the same old ones, repeated. As your own eyes grow heavier, you can let these images soften. The village fading into mist, the toll bridge quiet under the moon, the manor hall dark except for one last candle in a steward's hand. The story will move on from John soon, to other kings whose cold decisions shaped other lives. But for tonight, the fields of his England are wrapped in a hush that even royal orders cannot break. You are free to drift deeper into that hush, letting the unseen costs of power become nothing more than a faint echo, far away, beneath the steady rhythm of your own breathing. Across the narrow sea from John's misty England lies the kingdom of France, where different kind of monarch holds sway in the early years of the 14th century. Philip IV, known to history as the Fair for his tall stature, golden hair, and composed demeanor. Rules from grand stone palaces where the air carries the scent of polished marble, fresh rushes, and the faint metallic tang of coin-filled chests. His court is not restless like John's. It hums with a quiet, methodical efficiency, as if every servant, clerk, and noble moves to an unspoken rhythm of order and control. Yet beneath this calm surface, Philip's choices, ruthless in their precision, will mark him as a ruler whose beauty masked a cold pursuit of wealth and dominance, pressing hard on church, nobles, and knights alike. Philip's Paris is a city of slow grandeur, the Seine gliding past island walls, merchant stalls folded away at dusk, bells tolling softly from spires that pierce the evening sky. Within the royal residences, life unfolds in careful layers. Servants lay fresh herbs on floors each morning, their footsteps muffled by woven mats. Pages polish silver goblets until they reflect the king's unreadable face. In vast chambers hung with tapestries of hunts and saints, Philip holds audience, seated on a carved throne that elevates him slightly above those who approach. His voice, when he speaks, is even and measured, but his eyes miss nothing. The flicker of hesitation in a petitioner's words, the slight shift of a noble's posture. The immorality whispered of Philip later stems from his unyielding drive for revenue, treating the realm like a vast ledger to be balanced at any cost. He devalues coinage repeatedly, clipping silver and gold to stretch the treasury, leaving merchants and widows to reckon with lighter purses. He summons the Estates General, drawing clergy, nobles, and townsfolk into assemblies where they debate taxes he has already decided upon. His officials, clad in sober robes, fan out across provinces, assessing goods, levying aids on marriages and inheritances, squeezing every feudal right until it yields coin. Yet in the royal apartments, these acts appear as quiet consultations. A treasurer murmuring figures, Philip nodding once, a scribe's quill scratching approval onto parchment. Courtiers in Philip's circle adapt to his silent intensity. A favorite might rise through loyalty shown in small, precise ways, delivering a report without excess words, anticipating the king's need for solitude after a long council. This grace comes not with shouts, but with a cool glance, a name omitted from the next summons. Ladies of the court embroider in sunlit alcoves, their needles moving steadily as gossip flows in hushed tones about who has fallen from notice. The atmosphere encourages caution. Smiles are polite, bows deep, conversations circuitous. Even pleasure here feels controlled. Banquets where wine flows but toasts remain measured. Music from lutes that soothes without stirring passion. In the royal bedchamber, reserved for family and closest intimates, Philip sheds the throne's weight but not its demeanor. A fire crackles low in a massive hearth, casting shadows on frescoed walls. He might sit with a book of chronicles or a map of disputed borders, his fair features softened by flame but his brow still creased in calculation. Attendants withdraw silently, leaving queen and children to the evening's quiet. Philip's marriages of his daughters to foreign princes are not romances but calculated threads in a web of alliances, each union pondered like a move on a chessboard laid out on velvet. His own wedded life proceeds with duty's calm rhythm, producing heirs amid the steady tick of court clocks. Beyond the palace, Philip's policies ripple outward in gentle waves of pressure. In provincial towns, royal bailiffs arrive with tallies, demanding tallage on non-nobles, gifts from clergy, fines from Jews whose wealth he eyes keenly. A vintner finds his wine taxed heavier, passing the cost to buyers who sip it unchanged. A bishop, summoned to Paris, leaves his diocese leaner after loans to the crown. Villages under direct royal control see surveyors measuring fields, clerks noting every ox and plough, ensuring no harvest escapes the exchequer's net. These officials work methodically, their ledgers filling page by page, turning rural abundance into urban coffers without fanfare or remorse. Philip's court clergy, advisors drawn from monastic orders, blend piety with pragmatism. They draft bulls justifying fiscal rigor as service to the realm's stability. Their scriptoria are alive with the scratch of pens copying edicts. In chapel, masses for the king's prosperity mingle with prayers for his soul's burdens. Philip attends devoutly, kneeling on velvet cushions, his fair head bowed, yet rising to sign decrees that strain the church's own purses. The duality sits comfortably. Faith guides the hand, but necessity grips the fist. Knights and nobles, pillars of feudal order, chafe quietly under innovations like the apple, appeals to royal courts that draw cases from local jurisdictions, filling royal coffers with fees. A knight riding to hunt pauses at an inn, hearing murmurs of how the king's justices undercut baronial rights. Yet rebellion simmers low. Philip's aura of fairness and strength discourages open defiance. His progresses through the realm, slow cavalcades under canopied litters, remind subjects of his presence without terror, just watchful calm. At night, when the palace quiets, sounds emerge. Distant Seine lapping at quays, guards' boots on gravel paths, a lute's faint plucking from a lady's window. Philip might walk cloistered galleries, pausing at arrow slits to gaze over sleeping Paris, his mind turning taxes into ships, debts into diplomacy. Servants douse sconces methodically, tucking rushes smooth. In kitchens, scullions scrub cauldrons empty to feasts funded by fresh levies, their yawns echoing off tiled floors. The cart's silence amplifies small noises, a door's latch clicking, parchment rustling in a clerk's satchel left behind. Philip's family mirrors his poise. Sons learn governance at council edges, daughters courtesy in solar silences. A princess might trace illuminations while overhearing talk of dowries as diplomatic tools. The queen manages households with quiet authority, her chapels filled with candles for realm and kin. Even pets, greyhounds lounging by hearths, seem bred for elegance, not exuberance. This controlled world breeds loyalty through habit, not fervor. Courtiers stay because departure risks the chill of exclusion. In scriptoria serving the crown, illuminators gild Philip's charters, vignettes of kings dispensing justice framing clauses on revenues. Monks copy fiscal rolls, their chants underscoring tallies. The king's image, fair-haired, enthroned, appears in margins, a reminder that beauty and burden coexist. These books travel to provinces, impressing officials with permanence of policy. Philip's immorality, viewed softly from afar, lies in this relentless efficiency. Policies fair in form, harsh in effect, prioritizing crown over conscience. Chroniclers note his expulsion of Jews, arrests of Lombards, debasements eroding trust, acts methodical as clockwork, yet wounding his hidden blades. Yet daily, his court gleams, linens changed, mirrors polished, gardens trimmed. The disconnect soothes participants, they serve order, not oppression. As nights deepen, palace rhythms slow. Guards pace battlements, eyes on horizons where threats, Scotland, Flanders, England, lurk. Philip retires, crown set aside, but mind active under brocaded canopy. Dreams, perhaps, of boundless treasury, unassailable borders. Outside, Paris exhales. Apprentices curl in lofts, beggars under eaves, all bearing faint traces of royal needs in thinner pouches, delayed arms. You might imagine drifting through these halls, footsteps silent on rushes, passing dozing pages, glimpsing Philip's profile against window glow. The court's hush invites your own, eyelids heavy as tapestries sway faintly. His silent realm, beautiful yet burdensome, fades into night's embrace. Policies may whispers against your slowing breath, and as embers dim in distant hearths, Philip's court settles into the profound quiet that precedes dawn, its fair king dreaming amid the ledges of his making, while France breathes evenly under the weight of his watchful peace. In the early 1300s, under the composed but unyielding gaze of Philip the Fair, a shadow begins to spread across the corridors of power, one that will stretch far beyond the polished floors of his palaces. It whispers through vaulted monasteries and cloisters, threading its way into chapels where thin beams of early morning light fall softly on carved altars. The whispers speak of a once-honored order, the Knights Templar, whose white mantles bore the crimson cross as they guarded pilgrims and fought in far lands. Now, their fate will quietly intertwine with Philip's need for wealth and control, marking a moment when royal will and the deepest mysteries of faith and loyalty collide. For years, the Templars have been both respected and envied. Their fortified commanderies, strongholds scattered across France and the lands of old, stand as bastions of discipline and devotion. Yet their immense wealth, gathered from gifts, loans, and captured spoils, has become a silent point of tension. In Philip's court, rumors circulate. The Templars' coffers could solve his pressing debts. Their loyalty is uncertain. Unlike open battlefields or noisy courts, these tensions grow in shadows, secret meetings, encoded letters, and the rustle of vellum in darkened rooms. Their immorality, as Philip's agents say, is not a matter of open sin but hidden transgressions to be exposed. Yet the truth, tangled in whispers and fear, will never fully emerge. Philip's plan unfolds with methodical quietness. Agents are dispatched under the cover of routine royal business, quietly gathering evidence, interrogating servants and lesser brothers under oath or duress. A royal prosecutor, speaking softly, assembles charges that will shatter public perception. Not one shout or public battle opens this chapter. Instead, it is closed rooms and veiled threats, the cold scratch of quills composing decrees condemning blasphemy and heresy. The Templar castles, once buzzing with purpose, gradually grow quiet as walls close behind iron gates and heavy doors. In the corridors of power, Philip watches through veils of silence. His face remains calm, yet deep lines betray the stresses of the operation. He is neither cruel for cruelty's sake nor gentle from mercy. His is a disciplined hand laying claim to every available resource, using fear and the tool of law to reshape royal finances and authority. The morality of this quiet purge is hidden beneath layers of parchment and protocol. The verdict, carried out in secret trials and whispered accusations, becomes a means for a king to assert unmatched dominance, blotting out an order once regarded as sacred. Meanwhile, within the Templar Order, life shifts from confident rituals to cautious silence. Commanders who once rode at the head of armies now meet in startled secret, wondering what to believe and whom to trust. Young knights train in unused courtyards, their laughter fading as they lean closer to hear news or fears from whispered corners. The monks and clerics attending these houses feel the weight of suspicion hanging like a cloud, even as they continue prayers that seek divine protection and clarity in darkness. Candles burn low, pages lay unread. Colder winds blow through great halls once filled with hope and purpose. Outside the castles, townsfolk and peasants whisper rumors that the king's justice is swift and unyielding, that the great white knights have been overcome by shadows, that even the holiest are not beyond suspicion. These stories pass from market stalls to tavern corners, woven in half-truths and fears, growing with each telling. Yet many also feel a quiet wonder. What does this mean for the stability of their realm? If even the Templars fall, who can stand between a king and his ambition? Philip's moral certainty rests not in mercy but in control. Where once the Templars wielded the symbols of God's protection and martial glory, now they are reduced to prisoners and defendants. Public burnings of their leaders mark the grim closing of this chapter. The crackle of flame, the only visible echo of a king's cold will. The moral weight of these acts is measured not in outcries but in the hushed sorrow of those who knew the order, or lived in its shadow, and the steady assurance of a monarch who pays debts with iron fingers, not open hands. In the palace after such days, Philip returns to his silent chambers. The echoes of his decisions do not resound in cries, but in quieter spaces. The folded parchment on a marble desk, the slow drip of wax from extinguished candles, the soft snap of closing doors. His conscience, if troubled, remains behind a carefully maintained mask of serenity. The kingdom continues under his watchful eyes, its pulse steady despite the turmoil beneath the surface. In these moments, the cold logic of power becomes almost soothing in its certainty, as if closing a difficult book and knowing exactly what pages lie ahead. As you listen, imagine the flickering light of a candle in a quiet room, gentle and unswerving, surrounded by the stillness of stone walls and shadows that stretch long and soft. The story of the Templars and Philip the Fair, a tale of ambition, faith, and ruthless judgment, rests here, like a whispered prayer carried faintly on the night wind, inviting you to rest, to let your breathing slow, and to drift deeper into the calm embrace of history's long, hushed night. Far south, across the Pyrenees, in the Kingdom of Castile, the early 14th century is ruled by a king remembered by history as Pedro the Cruel. Yet, as with all monarchs whose stories are colored by harsh judgments, his world is less of stark shadows and bright lights and more of subtle shades and quiet complexities. Beneath the moonlit sky of his kingdoms, amidst tiled courtyards and alabaster fountains, life unfolds in contrasts, opulence shadowed by fear, beauty laced with suspicion, power mingling uneasily with personal torment. Tonight, we step softly into Pedro's world, walking through the tranquil spaces that hold the echoes of his troubled reign. Pedro's court is a place of ritual and routine, where the elaborate pomp of feasts and ceremonies provides cover for anxieties that stay beneath. His reputation for severity and suspicion finds expression not only in the acts recorded in Chronicle, but also in the subtle behaviors of courtiers and servants, careful glances, hushed whispers, guarded smiles. The king's walk between his chambers and the hall of audience is deliberate and solitary, his face pale in the torchlight, the weight of his crown reflected in every measured step. The courtiers hold their own breath as he passes, uncertain which of them will next fall into or out of favor. Behind tapestries embroidered with lions and heraldic beasts, Pedro's personal chambers are a study in contradiction, a place of lush velvet and cool stone, where music and laughter may mingle with long silences and sudden shadows. The flicker of candlelight throws soft light on tapestries depicting ancient legends, on intricately carved wooden chests, on a table set for evening refreshments. Amid this luxury, the king carries a restless spirit, pacing slowly, sometimes halting to stare into a marble basin filled with water, as if seeking answers in its depths. Outside the palace walls, the world turns steadily. A stable master tends to horses under pale lantern light, the horses quiet and watchful. Servants move through vaulted corridors, carrying folded cloth or empty cups with careful grace to avoid disturbance. A page rehearses lines of poetry in a quiet corner, his voice barely above a breath, while somewhere distant, the soft call of a nightingale mixes with the rustle of olive trees in the breeze. Pedro's realm is alive with such details, mundane actions carrying the weight of survival under a ruler both feared and enigmatic. Pedro's decisions, recorded in history as brutal or unjust, often come down quietly in his courtrooms and chambers. Disputes between nobles are settled with words sharper than swords, punishments meted out with cold finality, alliances forged and broken with an inscrutable expression. His reputation for cruelty is a shadow cast across his every decree. Yet within the elegant walls, these decisions sound like nothing more than the soft fall of a seal on parchment, the murmur of courtiers' prayers, the faint whisper of silk brushing against stone. Some nights, Pedro retreats to his private chapel within the palace, an intimate room with narrow lancet windows, stone walls covered in faded frescoes, and a single altar illuminated by beeswax candles. Here, away from the courtiers' eyes, he kneels in silence, the solemn beat of a distant bell marking the passing hours. His prayers may be supplications for strength, forgiveness, or relief from burdens that never truly lift. The personal struggles that history can only guess at unfold gently here, accompanied by the quiet drip of melting wax and the soft scrape of worn stone beneath his knees. Beyond the palace, the provinces bear the imprint of Pedro's reign in their own ways. Farmers tend olive groves, vineyards, and grain fields, aware that taxes may come suddenly, in grain or coin or labor. Merchants load goods in quiet ports along the Mediterranean, mindful of tolls imposed to fill the royal coffers. Peasants gather for festivals, their laughter mingling with songs as old as the land. Yet even joy is tempered by the knowledge of royal demands that shadow the coming days. In villages, the slow rustle of spinning wheels and the crackle of hearth fires create a steady background to lives intertwined with power beyond their reach. Pedro's reign is also marked by personal contrasts, moments of generosity and patronage that soften his harsher image in chronicles. Weddings graced with music and dance, generous gifts to favored nobles, acts of mercy quietly administered in shadowed rooms. These details surface between accounts of war and punishment, adding layers to a king whose legacy is as complex as the tiled courtyards he walked beneath moonlight. Such contradictions reflect the fragile nature of power, constantly negotiated between fear and favor, ruthlessness and restraint. When Pedro's gaze turns outward, toward distant borders and rival kingdoms, the weight of his crown grows heavier. Ambitions for expansion and defense press on his decisions, demanding not only armies and gold but the loyalty of restless subjects. His court buzzes with messages from scouts and envoys, the movement of troops a steady undercurrent beneath ceremonial pageantry. Yet even in the face of war, the calm safest of court life endures. A lute's gentle stringing, a noblewoman's embroidery, the faint scent of roses mingling with candle smoke. At night, the palace settles into darkness, torches extinguished in a slow procession, the king's footsteps muffled on tiled floors. Pedro may linger at a window, surveying the quiet of his realm, the stars drifting overhead as if indifferent to earthly concerns. The same moon that lights his gardens also watches over common folk asleep in their beds, unaware of the burdens and decisions threading through the tapestry of their days. The moral shadows cast by his name feel distant here, softened by time and the hush of night. As your breathing slows and your thoughts drift, picture the palace in stillness, the gentle ripple of water in fountains, the soft murmur of wind through cypress branches, the faint glow of embers in hearths nearly spent. Pedro the Cruel's world, like yours now, folds itself into the quiet embrace of night, waiting to greet the slow turning of dawn with all its possibilities and uncertainties. In the long, cool corridors of Pedro's Castilian palaces, power is not announced with shouts or trumpets, but felt in whispers, glances, and the soft fall of cautious footsteps. The stone underfoot is worn smooth by generations of courtiers, servants, and guards, all moving according to an invisible choreography of rank and fame. Under Pedro's uneasy rule, these passageways become places where loyalty is measured, secrets are traded, and the king's shifting favor is sensed long before it is spoken aloud. By day, the corridors are busy with purposeful motion. Pages hurry with folded messages, their soft leather shoes barely making a sound. Ladies of the court glide between chambers accompanied by maids, their skates brushing against carved door frames. Guards in mail and surcoats stand at intervals, hands resting lightly on the hilts of their swords, eyes tracking movements without turning their heads. Yet even in the bustle, voices stay low. Under Pedro's wary gaze, words can be dangerous, and silence can be a shield. Behind closed doors, the mood shifts with the turn of a key. In one chamber, a noble favored by the king meets with advisors, smiling thinly as he weighs how long his influence will last. In another, a once important courtier sits alone, listening to the muffled sounds of life continuing just beyond his reach. The corridors carry both kinds of stories, the rise and the fall, the welcomed and the quietly shunned. Every new rumor, of someone summoned abruptly, of someone sent away, changes the way people walk these halls, either a touch more confidently or a shade more carefully. At certain hours, when courtly business slows, the whispers grow clearer. A lady pauses by a window niche to speak quietly with a trusted friend, their fans raised just so, hiding their lips from prying eyes. A clerk, carrying a leather case of documents, lingers an extra heartbeat to catch a phrase or two as he passes a doorway. A servant, sweeping rushes from the floor, keeps her head down but her ears open, collecting tales that will later ripple through the servants' quarters. The king's latest decision, a favor granted, a punishment delivered, a marriage arranged, spreads like the faint scent of incense, everywhere and nowhere at once. At the heart of these corridors lies the royal audience chamber, where Pedro sits in judgment or hears counsel. When he is in a gentler mood, his presence may feel almost reassuring, his commands clear, his rewards generous. But those moments are uncertain, and courtiers never quite know whether they stand under a bright or a clouded sky. His reputation for sudden hardness keeps them in a state of watchful politeness. No one raises their voice. No one speaks too quickly. Every petition is crafted like a delicate piece of embroidery, each word carefully stitched to avoid offense. The servants who move along these passageways live closest to the palace's nervous system. They know which rooms are suddenly occupied late at night, which doors are kept barred in daylight, which faces appear drawn and pale after private audiences. A kitchen maid might remark that a certain lord has stopped taking his meals in the hall. A laundress might notice a new set of blood-stained linens arriving without explanation. A groom might sense tension in the way a noble mounts a horse, glancing back at the palace one last time. These observations, passed around in murmured exchanges as people work, sketch the outlines of a reign where fear and favor entwine like climbing vines along the same wall. Sometimes, under Pedro's rule, rumors travel faster than official announcements. A whisper that someone has angered the king might circle the palace long before any formal decree is issued. A musician who once played regularly in the royal chambers could find himself suddenly dismissed, his songs deemed unwelcome. A scribe known for his careful hand might be asked to copy a document that clearly spells doom for a man he has shared meals with. Such moments sit heavily on the conscience, yet in a court where the king's displeasure can fall swiftly, many choose survival over open protest. Outside the corridors, in the open courtyards and galleries, Pedro's presence is often felt rather than seen. A banner bearing his emblem hangs still in the heat of midday. Guards adjust their posture as they catch a glimpse of his cloak turning a corner far away. When he appears on a balcony above, the courtiers below look up as one, their expressions carefully arranged into admiration or at least respectful neutrality. The king's eyes scan the assembly, lingering momentarily on some faces, sliding past others. Those who feel his gaze upon them that day will carry its memory through the labyrinth of corridors long after he has withdrawn. While chronicles later emphasize Pedro's cruel acts and violent reprisals, the daily life around him is composed of quieter forms of unease. A lady might hesitate before accepting a gift that could be seen as a sign of allegiance to the wrong faction. A knight might rehearse, again and again, the exact words he will use when advising the king, shaving off anything that could be misinterpreted. A confessor might listen to anxious whispers in the palace chapel, sins of omission, words left unspoken, small acts of self-preservation that weigh heavily on tender consciences. Yet amidst all this caution, there are softer things as well. Children of the court chase each other along gallery edges, their laughter echoing briefly before being hushed by Nace's anxious hands. A young maid pauses to watch sunlight pouring onto a tiled floor, captivated by the pattern for a moment before hurrying on. In the evening, musicians gather in a side room, tuning lutes and zithers, unsure whether their melodies will be culled for that night or left unheard. Life, even under a fearful ruler, finds small ways to be tender and ordinary. In the private apartments, just beyond these corridors, Pedro's own mind is not immune to the pressures he generates. Suspicion, once set in motion, can become its own imprisoning wall. A king who fears betrayal may see it everywhere, in delayed answers, in sideways glances, in the absence of a familiar face at supper. The corridors then become a mirror of his inner state. Long, dim passages where certainty is always just slightly out of reach, doors open or closed without clear explanation, footsteps behind him not always easy to place. For those living and working within these walls, survival depends on learning the language of the corridors, the subtle grammar of pauses, looks, and routes taken or avoided. Some learn to arrive a little early to gatherings, others a little late, never wanting to be too prominent or too absent. A servant might choose a staircase that keeps him away from a certain chamber rumored to be the source of trouble. A courtier might spend more time near the chapel, cultivating an image of quiet piety that, they hope, will shield them from suspicion. Years later, when writers look back on Pedro's reign, they will record the executions, the purges, the brutal episodes that earn him the epithet the cruel. But as you drift deeper into quiet now, it is these camera details that linger. The soft thud of a page's shoes, the swish of a cloak turning a corner, the slight catch in a courtier's breath when his name is spoken unexpectedly. The moral weight of Pedro's choices presses most on those who inhabit these spaces, navigating the fine line between service and self-preservation. Imagine, toward the end of a long day, the corridors emptying piece by piece. Doors close with muted clicks. Torches are snuffed, leaving only the faint glow of moonlight from narrow windows. The echoes of talk and movement fade until only the distant murmur of a fountain can be heard, and perhaps the soft tread of a guard making his rounds. The palace, briefly at least, belongs to quiet itself. In this stillness, the stone seems to breathe out the day's tensions, ready to receive new ones when morning comes. As you rest, you may let these corridors blur into soft lines and shaded shapes, no longer sharp with anxiety but gentle with distance. The whispers fade, the footsteps still, and the palace of Pedro the Cruel becomes just another quiet building in the long, drowsy landscape of the medieval night, slowly dissolving into the darkness as you drift further into sleep. As the Middle Ages unfold, northern Italy becomes a patchwork of city-states, fortified towns, and countryside ruled by powerful families and warlords. The steady glow of twilight stretches across terraced hills and narrow streets lined with stone and brick, where banners flutter from towers and the sharp lines of battlements cut against the fading sky. Hey, behind high walls and heavy gates, men of ambition command armies, raise taxes, and negotiate allegiances. Their power is often exercised with iron fists beneath the calm surface of formal courts, creating a kingdom less of kings than of sharp-eyed rulers whose names may be less remembered but whose influence ripples through history like shadows across stone. Among these leaders stands figures like Zeleno da Romano, a name once whispered with dread, a man both feared and respected. His rule blends the roles of soldier, statesman, and harsh lord, his reputation shaped by merciless campaigns as well as by the alliances and betrayals that define Italian politics. The court he commands functions not through open displays of power alone, but through the precise use of force, law, and alliances forged in shadowed halls and on battlefields where strategy and ruthlessness intertwine. Within the stone walls of his principal stronghold, the atmosphere is both ordered and fraught with latent violence. A council chamber, lit by sconces and the fading daylight filtering through narrow slit windows, holds men discussing matters of war, finance, and loyalty. Their gestures are controlled, their expressions guarded. Decisions made here ripple quickly through the territories under Zeleno's control, enforcing obedience with a blend of fear, favors, and unhesitating punishment of dissent. Life in towns and villages under these warlords reflects the duality of power, security, and suppression entwined. Markets bustle during the day beneath God's watchful eyes. Craftsmen hammer and saw in shaded workshops. Children play along narrow alleys framed by stucco walls and crumbling frescoes. Yet beneath this surface lies an awareness that any displeasure toward the Lord or his agents might lead to swift repercussions. Stories pass in whispered voices about disappearances, heavy fines imposed after abrupt trials, or raids conducted on suspected pockets of rebellion. A procession of armored riders might thunder through the city gates, banners streaming, heralds announcing the passage of power. Citizens pause from daily tasks to watch silently, knowing that while the show is grand, the real rulings happen behind locked doors and stone staircases, where judges declare verdicts without jury, and sentences are carried out by small bands of soldiers whose loyalty lies with the Lord alone. Amidst this, family life exists in shadowed chambers behind iron-studded doors. Wives of warlords manage households with keen eyes, balancing hospitality with the need for vigilance. Sons are schooled in arms and diplomacy, daughters in alliances and courtly manners. Courtiers tread carefully, aware that advancement can be rapid, but so too can the fall from favor. The balance is delicate, and survival often depends on reading signs as faint as shifting candlelight shadows. Zeleno and others like him rule not by mercy but calculation. Their choices, whether to ally, to enforce a harsh tax, or to crush dissent, are often marked by restraint in presentation but certainty in effect. Orders are given in low voices, assurances offered with studied looks, threats implied through the conveyance of men-at-arms standing just outside chambers. The solidity of stone and steel underlines every decision. The walls themselves seem to listen, their echoes trapping words of command and concern alike. At times, courtesies and ceremonies provide moments of surface calm. Feasts held in great halls combine music, fine food, and displays of wealth. Nobles exchange pleasantries and gifts, while subtle power plays unfold beneath polite smiles. Games of strategy, like chess or dice, serve as metaphors for the real contests of influence and favor that dominate life in these courts. Such distractions offer brief respite but never remove the awareness of ever-watchful eyes and ears. As day turns to night, the town around the castle gradually quiets. Torches are extinguished, the sounds of footsteps become rarer, and the sharp edges of conflict soften, leaving a heavy silence. Soldiers on watch stand motionless under moonlit battlements, their breath visible in the cool night air. Within the Lord's chambers, candles gutter and smoke, letters lie unopened on desks. The figure of the warlord rests in an easy slumber, haunted perhaps by the weight of his choices. The legacy of these warlords, particularly one like Zeleno da Romano, is often written down in chronicles emphasizing cruelty and harsh justice. Yet, as the night deepens and stories soften into memory, what remains are also these quieter images: the measured footsteps on stone, the flicker of firelight in a guarded chamber, the slow pulse of guarded life beneath watchful eyes. For now, the dusk of Italy holds its secrets close, cradling the complex dance of power and survival as you drift deeper toward rest. With this quiet scene resting in your mind, the long shadows of Italian warlords fade softly into the night, while the story continues toward other courts and kings, each with their own whispered secrets and slow rhythms of power. As the Middle Ages pass through centuries, the lives and deeds of kings and queens, warlords and nobles come to us chiefly through the careful hands of chroniclers and scribes. These men, working in cloisters and royal scriptoria, write by candlelight, their quills moving slowly across parchment, preserving memory as much as history. Their quiet work shapes how we understand the past, the virtues and vices of monarchs, the turning points of realms, and the everyday acts folded within grand events. Tonight, we step softly into one such scriptorium, where the long memory of the Middle Ages is born in ink and silence. The chronicler's task is both simple and profound: to record, to organize, and to interpret. Their voices do not rise in argument or boast. They whisper through pages bound in leather, guiding future generations through the winding paths of time. They draw their knowledge from court records, letters, eyewitness accounts, and oral tales heard by flickering fires. With patience, they translate complex events into flowing narrative, choosing which stories to tell and which to leave silent. The judgments, whether a king is just, cruel, or wise, are shaped as much by personal perspective as by facts, giving history its gentle light and deep shadows. A monk might pause over a passage describing King John, weighing the words that will best represent a reign marked by harsh taxes and broken promises. Another scribe, far away, might be transcribing a tale of Philip the Fair's financial ingenuity or the downfall of the Templars, seeking balance between truth and tradition. Each scriptorium specializes in its region's tales, but a common thread weaves all together, a duty to preserve memory and order, that the lessons of the past may inform the present and future. The environment of these scriptoria is one of deep silence, broken only by the scratching of quills, the occasional clearing of a throat, or the faint turning of a leaf. The light is soft, coming from carefully placed candles and narrow windows set high in stone walls. The air smells faintly of beeswax, dust, and old leather. Outside, the sounds of birds or distant bells mark the passing of time, while inside, the monks immerse themselves in world-building through words. Their manuscripts become a bridge between the lived past and the imagined future. The moral tones imposed by chroniclers influence how history remembers monarchs described as immoral. Their interpretation often reflects the values of their own time, mingling piety, loyalty, and political allegiance. A king's greed might be labeled sin, a queen's influence, scandal. Yet these voices are also human, revealing the biases and uncertainties of those tasked with judging greatness and failure. The delicate balance between record and opinion shapes layers of meaning that historians still unravel centuries later. The long memory created in these rooms extends beyond princes and nobles to everyday life. The rhythms of harvest, feasts, and festivals, the weather's grace or wrath, the struggles of common folk. Chronicles include lists of plagues and famines, disputes over land, and the dates of market fairs. Through such details, we glimpse the full tapestry of the medieval world, softening the sharp edges of legend with the warmth of lived experience. As manuscripts are completed, they are wrapped in leather or velvet and placed carefully in wooden chests or chained to lecterns within great libraries. There, they await future hands, monks, scholars, and rulers, who will read, copy, and sometimes challenge the stories preserved. This chain of memory is fragile, vulnerable to fire, neglect, and the wear of centuries, making each surviving volume a precious thread connecting past and present. As you listen in this quiet hour, you may imagine yourself as one of these scribes, quill in hand, absorbing and shaping stories by the light of a flickering flame. The kings and queens whose deeds you hear are your subjects and your muses, their lives preserved through patience and faith. In the hush of the scriptorium, the long memory of the Middle Ages becomes a gentle river, carrying voices from centuries past, murmuring softly as it flows toward the depths of night and sleep. Let your own breath join this flow, slow and steady, as these ancient words settle like dust on old vellum, unfolding stories of power, kindness, cruelty, and humanity. Stories softened and sustained by the patient hands that recorded them, just as you now rest in the quiet embrace of history's long night. In shadowed alcoves and candlelit halls across medieval Europe, Satan monarchs turned their courts into realms of indulgence, where the pursuit of pleasure often overshadowed the weightier calls of governance and justice. These rulers, their reputations softened by time into tales of lavish banquets, silken entertainments, and whispered romantic intrigues, created spaces where music flowed like wine, fabric shimmered under torchlight, and the air grew heavy with perfume and laughter. Tonight, we drift through these courts not to condemn, but to observe the gentle sway of excess, the slow unfurling of nights devoted more to sensation than to stewardship. Life in such courts begins with the careful preparation of pleasure. Servants arrange tables draped in embroidered linens, their hands steady as they place crystal ears and delicate pastries dusted with sugar from distant lands. Cooks in steamy kitchens turn spits over glowing coals, the rich scents of spiced meats and honeyed confections wafting through stone passageways. Ladies select jewels that catch the light just so, the mirrors reflecting faces painted with subtle rouges, while gentlemen adjust brocaded doublets, the soft clink of chains and rings a quiet prelude to the evening's revels. As guests arrive, the hall fills with the hush of admiration. A monarch at the high table, perhaps crowned with laurels or gems, presides with a lazy smile, the hand gesturing languidly for more wine or song. Conversation flows in low, honeyed tones, compliments exchanged, poetry recited, laughter bubbling like a gentle stream. Minstrels pluck strings that weave melancholy airs with lively dances, their voices carrying tales of courtly love where knights pine for distant ladies under moonlit towers. The morality of such nights, where duties wait unattended, fades into the background haze of contentment. Romantic scandals, the soft undercurrent of these courts, unfold in private gardens or curtained alcoves. A queen might slip away with a favored knight, their whispers masked by the trickle of fountains and the rustle of night-blooming jasmine. Lovers exchange glances heavy with promise across crowded halls, their fingers brushing accidentally, or not, amid dances where bodies move close in measured steps. Such liaisons, frowned upon by chroniclers as moral lapses, appear here as natural extensions of the court's sensual rhythm, where fidelity bends to desire like a reed in a summer breeze. Beyond the immediate circle, excess touches all levels of service. Pages refill goblets without pause, their young arms aching beneath the weight of indulgence. Maids mend torn silks and launder linens stained with wine, their mornings spent in quiet toil to restore the splendor. Hunts organized for royal diversion send parties into misty forests at dawn, falcons circling silently as hounds pace softly through dew-kissed glades, returning with game to fuel yet more feasts. The land yields its bounty to sustain these pleasures, fields and vineyards taxed gently but persistently to maintain the flow. Jewelry and finery accumulate like dewdrops on a web. Monarchs collect ornate caskets filled with rubies from the east, enameled brooches depicting lovers entwined, golden chains heavy enough to leave faint marks on necks and wrists. Tailors work late into nights, stitching cloth of gold and ermine-trimmed mantles. The snip of shears and hum of looms a constant undercurrent. Gifts flow freely, poems bound in ivory, rare perfumes in crystal vials, binding courtiers closer in webs of obligation and delight. Music and dance provide the heartbeat of these gatherings. Troubadours arrive from distant courts, their satchels heavy with newly composed lays of unrequited passion. Harpsichords and viols blend in harmonious sighs, feet shuffling in intricate patterns across polished floors. Masks unfold with masked figures gliding like dreams, feathers and silk swirling in candlelit whirlwinds. Even the soberest advisors soften here, tapping fingers to rhythms that lull the mind from ledgers and laws. Perfumes waft through the air, distilled from roses, ambergris, and civet, applied with silver pomanders that release scents in gentle clouds. Incense burns in golden censers during evening prayers turned festive, its smoke curling lazily toward frescoed ceilings depicting gods and nymphs in eternal embrace. The senses are indulged without cease. Tastes of sugared almonds and preserved fruits, touches of fire-lined gloves and satin slippers, sights of ever-shifting colors in torch flame flicker. In quieter moments between revels, courtiers retire to cushioned window seats overlooking moonlit gardens, where fountains play eternal tunes and peacocks strut on graveled paths. Hey, confessions flow softly, admissions of fleeting affairs, regrets for neglected duties, yearnings for simplicities left behind. The monarch might join these gatherings, sharing wine from a shared cup, the laughter drawing others closer in shared vulnerability. Yet dawn brings no remorse, only plans for the next night's diversions. Servants witness the fullness of this life, polishing goblets crusted with dried wine, sweeping petals from dance floors, airing chambers thick with revelry's residue. Their own evenings bring simple suppers by kitchen hearths, tales exchanged of the court's endless appetites. Occasionally, a favored attendant shares in the bounty, a cast-off trinket, a sip of fine vintage, but most bear the labor quietly, their steadiness the unseen scaffold supporting excess. Chroniclers note these indulgences as signs of moral drift, rulers who feast while realms hunger, who chase pleasure while justice waits. Yet within the court's warm embrace, such critiques dissolve like mist. Duties deferred become tomorrow's concerns. Tonight belongs to the senses, to the slow savoring of roasted pheasant, the caress of a lover's breath, the melody that pulls heartstrings like gentle tides. The immorality lies not in acts themselves, but in the persistent choice of self over service, pleasure over prudence. As nights deepen, the revels wind slowly toward slumber. Guests depart in swaying litters, cloaks drawn against chill airs. The monarch retires to a bedchamber piled with bolsters and fays, attendants snuffing candles one by one. Embers glow faintly in vast hearths, shadows lengthening across brocaded walls. The cart exhales, its pulse slowing to match the rhythm of contented breaths. In this hush, The courts of pleasure settle like heavy drapes, their excesses folded into memory's gentle folds. Monarchs who lived for such nights now breathe evenly amid silken dreams, their realms waiting patient under starlit skies. As you too may let eyelids descend, carried on waves of historical indulgence into sleep's welcoming arms. In the shadowed wings of medieval palaces, where the clamor of thrones and banquets fades into quieter chambers, queens and noble consorts move through days marked by grace, endurance, and unspoken burdens. These women, often bound to husbands whose reputations cast long shadows of greed or cruelty, navigated courts with careful poise, their lives a tapestry of embroidery, prayer, and private reflection. Tonight, we'll linger softly in their world, the gentle click of needles, the murmur of chapels, the weight of choices made beyond their hands, honoring the quiet strength that held families and realms together amid moral tempests. A queen's mourning unfolds in measured rituals. Attendants help lace corseted gowns of velvet and brocade, their fingers deft as they arrange veils and jeweled girdles. Breakfast arrives on silver trays, white bread, preserved fruits, watered wine, eaten beside windows overlooking walled gardens where fountains murmur ceaselessly. Letters from distant kin are read aloud by trusted secretaries, their contents pondered over cups that steam faintly in cool air. These women, married for alliance rather than affection, absorb news of wars and weddings with composed faces, their own sorrows tucked behind embroidered smiles. In chambers dedicated to correspondence, queens pen replies in careful script, sealing wax with rings bearing house sigils. Their words weave diplomacy and devotion, pleading for mercy on behalf of petitioners or smoothing tensions between fractious lords. A husband lost to campaigns or councils leaves her as regent in quiet moments, managing estates with ledgers balanced by candlelight. The immorality of a spouse's harsh decrees reaches her as rumors first, whispers from maids, anxious pleas at chamber doors, met with sighs and folded hands rather than open protest. Private chapels become sanctuaries of solace. Hey, amid flickering beeswax candles and incense veiling stone altars, queens kneel on cushioned prie-dieu, rosaries slipping through fingers like measured breaths. Psalms chanted by personal chaplains offer balm for consciences strained by court intrigues or husband scandals. Donations to monasteries flow from personal coffers, illuminated books, embroidered altar cloths, acts of piety that quietly counterbalance the moral shadows cast by royal spouses. In these hushed spaces, sorrows find voice in murmured Latin, fading into vaulted silence. Daily routines provide steady anchors. Embroidery circles form in sunlit alcoves, where ladies stitch scenes of virtuous heroines or biblical virtues, needles flashing like tiny stars. Music lessons fill afternoons with lute strings plucked softly, voices practicing airs of longing and loss. Gardens invite slow walks along gravel paths, gloves shielding hands from thorns as roses and herbs release faint scents. Children, if present, tumble nearby under nurses' watchful eyes, their laughter a brief light-piercing maternal worries over uncertain futures. Bedchambers at nightfall hold deeper intimacies. Canopied beds draped in heavy silks receive weary forms, bolsters pounded smooth by maids. A queen might linger over a psalter, illuminated pages glowing under single tapers, while distant hall music drifts faintly through walls. Husbands return sporadically, their presences stirring duty-bound nights where passion mingles uneasily with resentment. Morning brings detachment, fresh linens, perfumes masking any traces, as life resumes its patterned flow. Servants form intimate orbits around these women, privy to tears shed in unguarded moments or rages vented behind closed doors. A favorite lady-in-waiting might hold whispered counsels over late-night caudle, sharing remedies for heartache or palace poisons. Confessors hear confessions of marital strains, offering absolution that eases burdened souls. These bonds, forged in shared confinement, provide rare authenticities amid artifice, where queens emerge less as icons and more as women bearing invisible loads. Feasts and ceremonies demand poised endurance. Seated beside husbands whose tempers simmer, queens moderate with gracious words, diverting barbs with jests or toasts. Masks and dances call for gliding steps in jewel-crusted slippers, fans concealing flushed cheeks or weary glances. Births and deaths punctuate years, labors in curtained birthing chambers, funerals draped in black velvet, each event amplifying isolation when spouses prioritize power over presence. Child-rearing weaves deepest sorrows. Heirs groomed for thrones carry paternal flaws, Daughters bartered for alliances face uncertain fates. Queens oversee tutors and nursemaids, their laps cradling tiny forms during stolen hours. Stories spun of kinder realms. Illnesses strike without mercy. Tiny graves dug in chapel yards, grief channeled into endowments for orphanages or perpetual masses. These losses, compounded by marital discord, etch lines softened only by time's gentle veil. Chroniclers, often clerical, judge these women through prisms of piety and fidelity, amplifying flaws while muting strengths. Scandals, real or rumored, overshadow stewardship of vast estates or patronage of arts. Yet their letters reveal minds sharp as swords, negotiating truces or funding scholars. Widowed, some wield regency with firmness, reshaping legacies tainted by husbands' immoralities into testaments of resilience. As evenings deepen, queens retire to oratories for vespers, candles multiplying like stars against stone. Prayers ascend for wayward spouses, fragile children, realms teetering on caprice. The air cools, silks rustle softly, peace descends like dusk over gardens. Their sorrows, born in silence, become history's quiet undercurrents, reminding that behind every throne's shadow stands a figure of unyielding grace. In this tranquil close, picture chambers emptied of daylight, queens at rest amid piled fays, breath sinking with hearth embers glow. Forgotten no longer in memory's hush, their lives unfold like well-tended gardens, patient, enduring, blooming despite storms, as you two settle deeper into night's compassionate hold. Deep within the folded hills and mist-shrouded valleys of medieval Europe, monasteries stand as islands of steady rhythm amid the tempests of royal ambition and courtly vice. Stone walls enclose cloisters where monks move in silent procession, their habits whispering against cool flagstones, preserving faith and knowledge while kingdoms rise and crumble beyond the gates. These sanctuaries, often burdened by the immoral demands of monarchs, taxes seized, abbots pressured, lands confiscated, hold firm through prayer, labor, and the quiet turning of solemnous pages. Tonight, we wander softly through their archways, breathing the air of incense and knife, where even the weight of worldly sin finds gentle containment. Amongst day unfolds in sacred cadence, matins before sunrise calls them from straw pallets, voices rising in unaccompanied chant that echoes our vaulted naves. Breakfast follows, dark bread, weak ale, cheese from the monastery's own herds, eaten in refectory silence broken only by a reader's steady voice reciting lives of saints. Labor claims the morning hours. Some tend scriptoria desks, copying chronicles of errant kings. Others hoe vegetable plots or mend nets for the fish ponds, their backs bent in humble mimicry of Christ's toil. Royal immoralities intrude softly, as papal bulls or sheriff's demands arrive by messenger horse. An abbot, seated in his sparse study amid stacks of charters, reads aloud levies imposed to fund a king's wars or whims, his face calm as he calculates tithes from meager granaries. Monks pause in their tasks, crossing themselves, then resume, plowing fields that may soon feed crown coffers rather than the poor at the gateways. Yet resentment simmers low, channeled into extra masses for the sovereign's soul, wax dripping steadily onto royal-named altars. Scriptoria hum with preservation's gentle industry. Illuminators apply gold leaf to evangelist portraits, their breath steady to avoid smudges. Scribes form tight Gothic letters recounting Philip's Templar purge or John's baronial woes, footnotes noting moral lapses with clerical restraint. These books, destined for cathedral libraries or noble patrons, serve as quiet reproof, history's ink bearing witness to thrones built on avarice. The scratch of nibs on vellum becomes a soothing litany, drowning distant clatter of lay brothers unloading tithe carts. Gardens and orchards provide solace and sustenance. Brothers prune apple espaliers, their shears snipping rhythmically. Herbalists gather feverfew and lavender for infirmary stores, scents rising like natural incense. Fish ponds ripple under willow shade, fed by slow streams where lay workers dredge with patient nets. These labors ground the community, a counterpoint to royal courts where excess reigns. Hey, sufficiency blooms from soil turned by calloused hands, shared equally at communal tables. Vespers gathers the full chapter in chapel, black-robed figures kneeling row on row as organ pipes sigh vesperal hymns. Incense swings in silver boats, veiling stone reredos carved with kings at judgment's throne. Prayers invoke mercy for immoral monarchs, John's treachery, Pedro's rages, while bells toll Compline, signaling retreat to dormitories where snores soon mingle with night winds. Infirmarians tend the ailing with herbal draughts, the vigils marked by maimed psalms. Guest houses welcome pilgrims and envoys, offering simple hospitality amid moral storms. A royal messenger, cloaked in mud-spattered velvet, sups on barley pottage while the abbot probes his tidings. News of fresh exactions or scandalous liaisons. Brothers serve without question, the charity extending even to those bearing crown's burdens, conversations turning to scripture over half-glowed evenings. Such encounters plant seeds of conscience, whispers of reform carried back to palaces. Lay brothers, illiterate but devout, handle worldly cares, gatekeeping, brewing, smithying. They buffer cloistered monks from royal sheriffs pounding for rents, haggling in rough Latin or vernacular tongues. Their quarters, spare and functional, ring with hammer falls and ale vats bubbling, a steady counter-rhythm to contemplative silence. Friendships form across divides, a monk sharing herbal lore with a blacksmith, bonds forged in shared labor under heaven's impartial gaze. Almonry doors open daily to the needy, bread loaves and vegetable stews portioned by brother porters. Widows from tax-squeezed villages, children orphaned by warlords' feuds, receive without interrogation, alms drawn from stores kings covet. This charity, defying royal greed, embodies the monastery's moral anchor, giving amid taking, faith persisting through oppression. Chroniclers note such acts, balancing tales of princely vice with monastic virtue. Scriptural study fills non-liturgical hours. Lectins hold chained Bibles, fingers tracing verses on humility and justice as antidotes to royal hubris. Disputations unfold softly in chapter house, voices debating aquinas on lawful resistance to tyrants, conclusions sealed with nods rather than decrees. These reflections, unheeded by distant thrones, sustain inner peace amid external gales. Night vigils mark the deepest hush. A few monks rise for lauds, their footfalls muffled on cold corridors leading to choir stalls. Stars wheel overhead through cloister quadrants, owls call from ancient oaks. Within, antiphons plead for rulers' conversion, candles guttering as psalms complete their nightly circuit. Dawn's approach brings prime, community reconvening as one body, resilient against the world's moral frailties. As twilight cloaks the valley, monasteries exhale into profound quiet. Embers bank in refectories, breviaries close on carols, bells fall finally silent. These havens, weathering king's tempests with bowed heads and open hands, embody endurance, faith's slow pulse amid history's tumults. As you too may settle into night's cloister, walls of breath enclosing your rest. Beyond the gilded halls of monarchs and the stone sanctuaries of monks, the Middle Ages pulse with the quiet rhythm of everyday lives. Lives shaped not always by the grand deeds of kings, but by the slow, steady passing of seasons, the small joys and burdens that bind communities together. In the shadow of rulers judged harshly by history's moral eye, ordinary people, peasants, artisans, merchants, wove the fabric of medieval society with resilience and care. Tonight, we drift gently into the fields, villages, and market streets to hear the whisper of lives lived quietly beneath the weight of imperfect power. Farmers rise before dawn to tend crops that feed kingdoms and keep hearths warm. They plot fields with patience, rotating grains and legumes under the watchful eyes of weathered elders. Hoes and sickles move rhythmically through soil, sweat and leather worn as marks of enduring craft. These hands, though distant from palatial luxury, hold the real power of sustenance, quietly resisting famine, toil hardening within callous that speak of survival rather than glory. Village markets hum with life as traders from nearby towns arrive with cloth, spices, and pots. The air mingles with smells of fresh bread and leather, mingled voices bargaining in accents thick with local dialects. For merchants, the road is both promise and peril, tolls and inspections, low rumbles that inch into profit but do not stifle enterprise. Bargains struck beneath awnings striped with faded colors sustain livelihoods and occasionally grant small comforts, bright fabrics for festival days, or coins saved for winter's chill. Behind sturdy wood and wattle walls, households bustle with daily chores. Women spin thread on distaffs, weaving wool into blankets that will cradle newborns. Children chase cats among haystacks, the laughter of fragile light against hard seasons. Half fires crackle beneath iron pots simmering thick stews of root vegetables and salt pork. Storytellers gather at dusk, sharing legends embroidered with humor and wisdom, their voices rising softly like the smoke curling into starlit skies. Craftsmen and artisans form the vibrant heart of medieval towns. Blacksmiths hammer glowing metal, shaping tools, and horseshoes, the steady ringing a drumbeat of productivity. Bakers knead dough in cool kitchens, yeast rising slowly in earthenware bowls. Tailors cut cloth with precision, their hands steady despite the flickering lamplight. Each guildsman, through skill and pride, contributes threads to the kingdom's fabric, often working beneath the weight of taxation imposed by immoral monarchs collecting ceaseless dues. The villages and towns below royal courts cough with the dust of roads traveled by messengers and soldiers. Fields bear footprints of beside labor and campaign marches. Townsfolk whisper of the rumors trickling from palaces, new taxes, unexpected levies, harsh edicts. Yet the days remain filled with the same tasks of sowing, harvesting, repairing, and tending, each action a quiet defiance amid uncertainty. Peace found in routine softens the edges of distant tyranny. In churches scattered across the countryside, the tolling of bells marks time's passage and soul's needs. Priests tend to flocks in humble chapels, offering solace in sermons rooted less in court intrigue than in Scripture's promise of hope. Parishioners bring offerings, sheaves of grain, woven cloth, coins saved from thin purses, with faith that their small acts keep the world in balance. Even during times of conflict or royal excess, daily festivals and holy days mark the calendar with moments of communal joy. Markets swell with laughter, dances well in public squares, musicians wind pipes and tambourines into melodies that chase away shadows. Feasts celebrate saints' days with hearty stews and honey cakes, candles lit for luck and gratitude. These interludes create bonds among neighbors, pockets of light preserved against wider political darkness. The immorality ascribed to monarchs, a word heavy with judgment, touches these lives indirectly but inexorably. When a king raises taxes to fund wars, it is a mother trimming household needs. When a lord demands more labor, it is a farmer shifting seed times. When justice is meted out unfairly, it is a widow who waits longer for relief or a tenant fearing eviction. Such impacts, though indirect, multiply in quiet hardship, shifting the moral landscape beneath every footstep. At day's end, villagers return to humble homes where fires flicker low, stories of kings and battles mingling with tales of local saints and legends. Nets are mended, clothes dried, children lullabies softly sung by candlelight's warm glow. The grand affairs of thrones dissolve into the small certainties of family and hearth, where safety and love provide shelter from distant storms. As you listen and rest within this slow unfolding of everyday life, you may feel the steady pulse beneath history's grand dramas, the strength of simple acts, sowing, sharing, enduring. While monarchs rise and fall, villages persist. Their steady breaths join yours now, calm and slow, each heartbeat a quiet poem of resilience as you drift softly towards your own night's gathering peace. As the medieval world turns beneath the eternal sky, the passage of time is felt most profoundly not in the great halls nor courts, but in the gentle, measured cycles of nature surrounding the kingdoms. Seasons shift softly from budding springs to frosted winters. Rivers course steadily through fields and forests. Daylight lengthens and shortens like a slow, familiar song. These rhythms cradle the lives of peasants and lords alike, offering constancy amid the flickering uncertainties of power struggles and moral reckonings. Tonight, we move quietly into this natural world, into gardens, woods, and waterways where the pulse of life unfolds with patient grace, inviting rest and reflection. Gardeners rise early to coax new life from soil warmed by sun and rain. Their hands, dirt-stained and steady, plant seeds that will take months to bear fruit. Tulips and hyacinths break through Earth's crust, their colors coaxed into bloom as insects flit among branches. The scent of damp moss and fresh leaves fills the air, mingling with the woody aroma of cutting herbs and the faint tang of river mist carried on gentle breezes. The garden is a living tapestry of patience and hope, a quiet counterpoint to the restless ambitions of monarchs. In distant orchards, fruit trees stand bare in winter or heavy laden in autumn's glow. Pickers climb ladders gingerly, baskets in arms, as apples and pears fall softly onto straw mats below. The slow flow of seasons shapes the rhythm of labor and rest, of feasting and fasting, framing the agricultural year with certainty. These cycles, experienced by all, from noble households to peasant farms, offer a shared language of time that outlasts the ephemeral dramas of kings and courtiers. Along forest paths, shafts of light sift through ancient oaks and beeches, illuminating swaying ferns and mossy rocks. The soft chatter of wildlife, birds, squirrels, distant deer, blends with the rustle of leaves stirred by passing wind. Monks and layfolk alike seek solace in such places, finding in the woods a sacred refuge where silence speaks louder than words and nature's slow unfolding echoes the eternal. Rivers and streams carve roots through the landscape, their waters whispering stories of time's passage. Fish move in shadowed pools, reeds sway gently along banks, and mills turn ceaselessly as grain yields to steady hands. The sound of running water becomes a lullaby, marking hours and days with a constancy that even the most disturbed chord cannot undo. Along these waterways, fishermen cast nets with practiced hands, their skill passed through generations, their catches feeding families far beyond the king's fay. Herds and flocks migrate between pastures guided by shepherds' crooks and watchful eyes. The bleating of sheep and lowing of cattle fill valleys with life's continual call and response. Animal husbandry rhythms dictate flow of labor while also offering moments of quiet joy, from lambs gamboling in spring to blankets of wool woven in winter's hearth warmth. These everyday scenes, grounding and persistent, whisper of a medieval world that turns with the earth's slow dance rather than the sudden wheel of power. Farmsteads patchworked across hillsides nurture these cycles. Stone walls echo ancient boundaries, while smoke rises lazily from thatched rooftops. Open fields sway with golden grains or green pastures. Barns shelter tools worn smooth by hands of generations. Families share meals under open skies, their laughter mingling with the hum of bees and distant church bells ringing clear through rosy evenings. Hey, the great moral reckonings of Monarchs seem distant, softened by the grounding presence of earth and sky. Each year, festivals mark turning points of nature's calendar. Harvest home celebrations with garlands of dried flowers, winter solstice feasts lit by flickering torches, spring dances beneath blossoming trees. Villages gather in joy and gratitude, music intertwining with the crackle of fire and the chill of night air. Such communal moments offer relief and renewal, weaving social bonds that sustain through tighter times. They remind all that beneath the weight of kings, the world's will continues to turn steadily, inexorably. The medieval calendar, marked by saints' days and holy observances, guides daily life with gentle insistence. Morning prayers rise with the sun, noon bells call to rest, evening vespers wrap the day in sacred silence. These cyclical rituals echo nature's patterns, creating a spiritual resonance that softens the sharp edges of political turmoil. The slow unfolding of liturgical time offers consistency, a framework within which individuals find meaning amid changing fortunes. As day fades to night, homes and hearths become sanctuaries from the chill. Fires crackle in stone fireplaces, casting dancing shadows on wooden beams. Families gather around tables with simple fare, bread, cheese, pottage, sharing stories and plans with soft laughter or thoughtful silence. Outside, stars wheel overhead, ancient and indifferent to the mortal dramas unfolding below. Night creatures call from forests, evening breezes carry scents of heather and pine. In this enduring natural rhythm, time's gentle pulse lulls sleepers into dreams untroubled by crowns or swords. In the quiet twilight of this world, where nature's steady hand guides the unseen lives behind history's great motions, you may find comfort, a soft embrace woven from wind, earth, and water. Let this tranquility settle in your mind and breath, letting the slow turn of seasons carry you gently toward rest. The kingdoms pass, the kings fade, but the world's quiet song remains, steady as the stars. Amidst the grand realms and the muddy villages, the clergy occupy a unique space in the medieval world, a realm of spiritual authority tempered by human frailty. Monks, priests, and bishops serve as mediators between God and man, tasked with guiding souls through the moral labyrinth of their times. Yet they too grapple with the shadows cast by immoral monarchs, caught between devotion and political pressure, responsibility and survival. Tonight, we enter their quiet world, the silent struggles behind the altar and the cloister, where faith and duty intertwine with the complexities of power. Life for a parish priest is a balance of ritual and pastoral care. Each morning begins with prayers said in solitude, the recitation of psalms echoing off cold stone walls. The day unfolds with visits to the sick, baptisms under arched doorways, counsel to conflicted villages, and administration of church properties often entangled in feudal demands. These duties, wrapped in spiritual purpose, are no less burdened by the practical challenges imposed from afar. Taxes levied by kings, interference from local lords, the ebb and flow of royal favor. In cathedral towns, The clergy are both spiritual leaders and political actors. Bishops negotiate with monarchs over lands and privileges, their palaces filled with advisors and scribes. They attend convocations and councils where matters of doctrine, law, and politics intertwine in hushed deliberations. Yet beneath this influence lies a constant tension: how to uphold church teachings while navigating the ambitions and sometimes ruthless policies of worldly rulers. The clergy's moral compass is tested, bending but striving to remain true amid shifting allegiances. Monastic life continues in cloistered quietude, the daily round measured by bells and the rhythm of manual labor and prayer. Chanting fills vaults. The scent of incense lifts toward frescoed ceilings depicting heavenly courts. Yet monasteries also face royal exactions, the confiscation of lands or revenues to fund monarchs' dreams of conquest or splendor. The abbots find their stewardship tested, balancing obedience to the spiritual mission with the harsh realities of political obedience and fiscal survival. Scriptoria flourish as monks devote hours to copying sacred texts and chronicles. Hey, every letter is penned with care, gospels illuminated with colors vivid as jewels, histories written with an eye toward truth and tribute. Within these walls, manuscripts become silent witnesses to the moral complexity of the age. Praises of saintly kings alongside condemnations of tyrants. Prayers for mercy for all souls regardless of station. The flicker of candlelight on vellum represents faith's fragile light against worldly darkness. Beyond stone walls, parish churches become the heartbeats of rural communities. Priests hold mass, consecrate bread and wine, hear confessions whispered beneath wide timber beams, and administer funerals that mark the passage of life's fragile thread. Their sermons preach forgiveness and justice, often juxtaposed with the realities of monarchs who bend laws and lean on cruelty. Parishioners find solace and guidance here, drawing strength amid external turmoil, their prayers threading through centuries. The clergy also serve as scribes of memory. They record baptisms, marriages, deaths, and the gifts of patrons, creating registers that anchor families through time. These humble records extend history beyond chronicles of kings, preserving the texture of everyday existence, the calls of bell, the touch of hand, the turn of seasons. Bound within parchment, the lives of many find dignity and place, protected by faith's enduring reach. Conflicts between church and crown often unfold in muted crises. Monarchs may challenge the appointment of bishops, confiscate church lands, or enforce taxes that strain ecclesiastical resources. Clergy, while loyal in faith, may resist or negotiate, balancing obedience with conscience. These tensions shape policies and politics as much as sermons and sacraments. In chapels and councils alike, the morality of power is a constant, subdued negotiation. At night, monasteries and parishes settle into profound quiet. Fires burn low. The soft murmur of night prayers rises like breath along cloisters. Candles gutter as monks kneel in solitude, their whispers weaving continuity where kingdoms falter. The clergy's morale bears the weight of the age's moral storms, but their steady prayers and daily rituals form unbroken chains of faith reaching into the night and into our own listening. As your thoughts calm and your breathing slows, imagine yourself among these silent sentinels, candle held close, quill poised over vellum, heart steady in service. The clergy's ancient struggles and steadfast hope become a lullaby woven of light and shadow, beckoning you gently toward rest beneath the timeless sky of medieval nights. Across the bustling crossroads of medieval Europe, merchants and artisans formed the vital arteries of commerce, their wagons creaking along dusty roads and their stalls alive with the clamor of exchange. From local markets to grand trade fairs, these traders navigate tolls, guilds, and royal demands, turning raw goods into prosperity amid the moral ambiguities of kings who tax heavily to fund their ambitions. Their world is one of calculated risks and communal bonds, where the jingle of coins and the haggling of voices create a rhythm far removed from palace intrigue yet essential to its sustenance. Tonight, we wander these vibrant spaces softly, feeling the steady heartbeat of trade that sustained realms through seasons of feast and famine. A merchant's day dawns early, with the loading of packhorses or carts at dawn's first light. Wool from English pastures, cloth from Flemish looms, spices from distant eastern routes. Each bundle represents weeks of planning and peril. Tolls at bridges and city gates nibble at profits, paid grudgingly to royal officials whose ledgers feed monarchs' treasuries. Yet the promise of fairs like those in Champagne, held in Troyes or Provence, draws them onward, where Italian bankers offer credit and policing ensures safer dealings. These gatherings swell with wool traders from England, spice merchants from Genoa, and Flemish drapers, their voices rising in multilingual bargaining under protective counts' watchful eyes. Guilds stand as the backbone of this commerce, merchant guilds first emerging to control markets and protect members' interests. In towns like London or Bruges, these associations regulate stalls, set prices, and lobby kings for trade charters, paying annual fees for royal protection over feudal lords' fragmented tolls. Craft guilds follow, grouping artisans, blacksmiths, weavers, bakers, into tight-knit bodies that enforce quality, train apprentices, and limit competition. A young smith starts as apprentice, lives with the master, learns hammer and tongs over years, then crafts a masterpiece to join the guild, gaining rights to his own workshop and stall. Women often dominate certain trades, selling eggs, ale, or dairy from market edges. There are greater networks buying wholesale and reselling with shrewd efficiency. Workshops hum with focused industry. In a weaver's loft, looms clack rhythmically as apprentices win shuttles through taut warp, dyes steaming in copper vats below. Bakers rise at midnight, kneading dough by lantern light, ovens glowing as loaves rise for dawn markets. Tailors hunch over oaken benches, scissors snipping wool into doublets, needles flashing to stitch guild-inspected seams. These spaces, narrow and soot-stained, foster pride in craft, where flawed piece risks guild fines or expulsion, ensuring standards that king's arbitrary taxes could not erode. Trade routes pulse with movement. Overland caravans brave bandits and mud, high-value luxuries like silks, spices, and glass justifying the tolls at passes and rivers. Maritime paths prove safer for bulk, wine casks from Gascony, timber from the Baltic. Despite storms and pirates, ships hold swelling economies as canals and better hulls cut costs. Fairs in Champagne or Flanders become economic hubs, counts providing safe passage and officials resolving disputes, drawing crowds from Italy, Spain, and England where will reign supreme. Hey, alliances form between monarchs and merchants, kings granting monopolies for revenue, weakening nobles' grip while funding standing armies with toll yields. Daily markets anchor local life. Weekly gatherings in village squares or town centers offer bread, meat, pots, filling stalls by estate owners or councils licensed by kings. Hucksters hawk door to door, peddlers with trays weave alleys, while guild masters oversee rows of like goods, fish beside fish, cloth by cloth, to foster competition yet control. Women predominate in poultry and ale, their booths fragrant with fresh loaves or foaming mugs, voices sharp in barter that feeds families through lean winters. Regrators bridge producers and stalls, ensuring flow even as royal levies strain supplies. Guild halls serve as social hearts. Masters convene evenings over ale, debating apprenticeships or quality marks stamped on wares. Feasts celebrate saints' days on new charters. Minstrels strumming as widows' funds aid fallen members' kin. These bodies wield power, boycotting unfair lords, funding town defenses, elevating craftsmen from serfdom to burgher status, their collective strength bargaining better terms against immoral kings' endless exactions. Long-distance ventures demand cunning. A wool merchant from Coventry joins convoys to Italy, navigating Genoese galleys and Venetian markets where spices swap for cloth. Risks abound, pirates off Sicily, debased coinage clipping values, but profits by townhouses, fund masses for safe returns. Guild ledgers track debts, early banks like Champagne's Templars offering letters of credit, easing coin-hauling perils. Artisans' lives blend toil and community. A mason's yard rings with chisel on stone, apprentices hauling line for cathedral vaults, guild feasts rewarding milestones. Shoemakers stitch leather by windows, smells of tannery mingling with bread from next-door ovens. These tradespeople, taxed by kings funding wars or splendor, persist through guild solidarity, mutual aid funds burying dead, training orphans, resisting price caps. Evenings bring respite. Merchants tally ledgers by half, wives spinning beside, children reciting guild apprenticeships. Taverns overflow post-market, tales of shrewd deals or lost cargoes swapped over ale. Festivals swell fairs into carnivals, jugglers, bear baiters, miracle plays, where trade pauses for communal joy, strengthening ties that weather royal greed. Chroniclers note guilds rise curbing feudal chaos, merchants allying with crowns against barons, fostering early nation-states. Yet under immoral rulers like John or Philip, tolls multiply, debasements erode trust, forcing guilds to adapt, standardizing weights, pooling risks. Their resilience turns adversity to innovation. Canals dug, ships improved, economies broaden beyond luxury to everyday grains and cloth. As twilight falls, markets empty, stalls folded, carts rumbling homeward, guild halls quiet, workshops dark save embers. Merchants dream of next fairs, artisans of masterworks. This commerce, pulsing beneath thrones, endures. Its voice is a steady hum inviting your own breath to slow, joining the ancient cadence of exchange as night claims the roads. In the open fields and clustered hamlets of medieval Europe, peasants and serfs formed the enduring backbone of society, their lives woven tightly into the rhythms of soil, season, and communal bond. Bound by the manorial system to lords' lands, they till strips in open fields under three-field rotation. Wheat or rye in autumn, oats or barley in spring. The third left fallow for grazing and recovery, yielding sustenance amid royal taxes and feudal dues that fund distant kings' moral failings. Their world is one of dawn-to-dusk labor softened by family ties, church bells, and harvest joys, a quiet resilience that outlasts thrones. Tonight, we walk these furrows gently, hearing the earth's patient whisper beneath calloused feet. A serf's weak balances personal plot and lordly domain. Monday through Wednesday, perhaps, they plow the manor's heavy soil with shared oxen teams, moldboard plows turning deep furrows for drainage and weed control. Thursday to Saturday shifts to their own strips, sowing rye for bread, peas for pottage, harvesting with sickles or scythes come summer. Women weed gardens of cabbages, onions, leeks. Children scare birds from ripening grains or herd geese on fallow. Sundays offer rest, church, mending, ale haste tales, saving strength for boons like road mending or castle building when the Lord calls. Huts cluster in villages near manor house and church, wattle and daub walls daubed with mud, thatched roofs leaking in storms. Inside, a single room holds central hearth for pottage of barley, beans, leeks, boiled hours over wood scraps, eaten from trencher with wooden spoons. Straw pallets line walls for sleep, fleas, and smoke companions. Hygiene means stream washing, delousing combs past Kintikin. Families huddle close, 8 or 10 under one roof. Births and deaths marked by priest's bell. Obligations bind like plough traces. Serfs pay Harriet on death, a best beast to the Lord. Macy on marriage, church tithe of 1/10 crops. They cannot leave manor without permission, yet hold heritable tenure, protected from eviction save legal cause. Lords offer justice in manorial courts, charity in famine, but extract labor 3 days weekly, plus harvest boons when all hands rush golden fields. Free peasants pay cash rent, freer to market surplus, but serf stability endures through generations. Spring brings plowing frenzy, oxen yoked, women following with seed baskets, February fertilizing with manure spread by spade. April shears sheep for wool spun into rough cloth, May hoes weeds as lords hunt. June haying with scythes, wheat harvest reaping with sickles, families threshing flails under barns. Autumn sows anew, pigs fattened on acorns, grapes trodden for weak wine. Winter mends tools, spins wool, slaughters hog for salt pork lasting lean months. Tools, sickle, flail, billhick, mark hand scarred yet skilled, communal plowing sharing scarce oxen. Church anchors village soul. Bells call matins, mass, vespers. Priest baptizes, marries, buries. Hears confessions of stolen eggs or neighbor quarrels. Tithes fill granary 1/10 yield. Offerings by candles for saints. Mysteries plays at Corpus Christi reenacted in full. Villages as actors drawing laughter mid-morality. Faith tempers toil, promising heaven offsetting earthly dues to immoral lords echoing king's greed. Festivals fracture labor's grind. May Day crowns queen of fields, Morris dances 12 bells. Harvest home heaps tables with ale, pasties, cheese. Whitsun elects king for ale's funding church repairs. Robin Hood bows shooting prizes. Shrovetide wrestling, archery for war readiness, Christmas mummings, Yule logs burning bright. These breathe joy, music, dance, games, forging ties stronger than feudal chains. Women shoulder unseen loads, milking dawn cows, churning butter, brewing ale sold door to door, birthing amid midwives' herbs. They brew stronger ale for markets, regulating produce. Widows hold tenures, courts judging their plaints. Children apprentice young, herding, spinning, marrying mid-teens to expand labor pool. Elders advise, tell saints' tales by fire, wisdom seasoning young against famine, plague. Manorial courts convene monthly under oak, reeve calling cases, stray beasts, boundary fights, ale strength disputes. Fines in hands or pence fill lord's purse, yet offer voice. Serfs sue freely, verdicts by peers. Lords protect from bandits, famine aid from domain stores, balancing extraction with sustenance. Royal taxes trickle down, scutage for knights, aids for ransoms, stretching thin stews thinner. Winter evenings knit community. Spinning bees trade yarns, tales of fairies, ghosts, church ales fund roofs. Youth court woos with songs, marriages seal alliances, weddings feasting pig, dancing till dawn. Death's prompt wakes, bells tolling souls to rest. These rituals weave resilience, buffering kings' distant vices. Surplus sells locally, eggs, cheese, cloth, buying iron nails, salt. Fairs draw peddlers with pins, ribbons, gossip flows with goods. Population growth strains land, yet Black Death later swells wages, eroding serfdom. Peasants endure, innovating rich furrow drainage, horse collars boosting plows. As dust cloaks furrows, families sup by rushlight, embers dying slow. Tomorrow dawn same, plow, pray, persist. Their heartbeats, steady under history's wheel, join yours now, lulling into night's deep furrow where labors cease, dreams till softer soil. Medieval Europe unfolds as tapestry woven from the three estates, those who fight, nobility, those who pray, clergy, and those who wike, peasants, a hierarchy ordained by God and enforced by custom, where each order's duties interlock like chains of fealty amid kings' moral shadows. Kings at the apex grant fiefs to nobles for military service, nobles protect clergy lands, clergy bless the realm with salvation, while peasants toil to feed all, the labor's tax to sustain the upper estate's privileges. This structure, rigid yet interdependent, shapes every life from throne to furrow, binding society in mutual obligation beneath heaven's watchful eye. Tonight, we trace these threads softly, seeing how the estates entwine in daily quiet, sustaining realms through centuries of strife and grace. Those who fight, the nobility, embody martial valor and land stewardship. Kings parcel realms into fiefs, dukes and counts hold vast counties, barons smaller honors, knights tiniest manors, each swearing homage with hands clasped over relics. Trained from boyhood in tilts and tourneys, they muster 40 days' service yearly, banners streaming to crush rebels or repel invaders, their hauberks gleaming under summer suns. Noblewomen manage estates in absence, oversee harvests, arrange marriages sealing alliances, their dowries lands or coin preserving bloodlines pure. Privileges exempt them from tallage, yet feuds simmer, baron against duke, all eyeing the crown, while immoral monarchs like John squeeze scutage cash for mercenaries, straining vassal loyalties. Those who pray, the clergy, form the second estate, from pope crowning emperors to parish priests christening babes. Higher clergy, bishops, abbots from noble stock, wield crosiers like scepters, advising councils, anathematizing tyrants, their palaces rivaling courts with scriptoria copying Aquinas. Regular clergy in monasteries chant octaves, till cloister gardens, secular priests serve altars, absolve sins for pence. Women enter convents as abbesses ruling domains, copying psalters by rushlight. They claim tithes 10th from every harvest, pray for souls including errant kings, yet face royal investiture battles, Philip jailing bishops, Henry naming abbots, tensions where spiritual swords clash temporal steel. Those who wake, the third estate, vast majority, bear society's weight on bowed backs. Free peasants rent vergets, serfs bound to glebe, both rotating 3 fields, winter corn, spring legumes, fallow graze. They owe week work 3 days manorial, boon work harvest, merchant wedding, harriet death beast, their surpluses feeding noble halls and church larders. Villages self-govern via courts, reeves elected tallying dues, ale tasters finding weak brew. Amid this, they craft tools, brew ale, spin wool, markets trading eggs for salt, resilience weathering royal aids for ransoms or wars. Interdependence binds the estates like yew bow and hempstring. Nobles defend monasteries from Viking raids, granting charters for prayers. Clergy crown kings legitimate, absolve crusader sins. Peasants provision knights' campaigns, tithe for masses easing purgatory pains. Feasts unite them, noble hosting Michaelmas hunt, clergy blessing fields, peasants dancing ring shouts. Courts mingle, noble hall judges villain thefts, bishop synod disciplines priests. Village moot settles boundary spats. This web, though unequal, offers protection. Lord shielding serfs from bandits. Church arms famine-struck. King charters market fairs boosting peasant coin. Tensions thread the fabric. Nobles chafe at royal summons. Clergy at lay investitures. Peasants at extra tallages funding king's vices. John's French losses. Edward's Welsh wars. Yet revolts rare. What Tyler's men cry when Adam delved in Eve's span. Who was then the gentleman? But yield to pardons. Church preaches three orders divine. Paulinus versifying happy estate where each fulfills his role. Quelling unrest with sermons on obedience. Women cross estates. Noble daughters veil as nuns. Peasant maids serve castle kitchens. Yet roles rigid. Mobility scant save were widowed heiresses or merchant sons ennobled. Daily intersections reveal humanity. Night pauses plow prayer. Shares ale. Abbot visits infirmary. Hears serf confessions. Queen founds Lazar house. Widows pray there. Markets mix all. Duke buys Flemish cloth. Priest Flemish cheese. Villain pins. Pilgrimages blend estates. Noble funds Canterbury trek. Monk guides. Peasant carts relics. Festivals dissolve divides. Carnival lords elected from ploughmen. Clergy joining hover horse dances. Guilds emerge blurring lines. Merchants aping nobles with livery companies. Lower clergy tutoring burghers' sons. Universities spawn clerks rising to chancellors. Doctors healing earls. Yet estates endure. Black death swelling peasant wages, but not erasing furrow from fate. Chroniclers like Old Eric frame history thus. Nobles fight well. Clergy pray purely. Workers labor justly. Moral yardstick judging kings Pedro cruel. John treacherous. Evenings knit estates closer. Noble hearth hosts traveling friar tales. Cloister refectory reads St. Live's peasants donate. Village ale sings ballads of Robin Hood tweaking sheriffs. Marriages forge bonds. Knight weds merchant heiress. Abbess endows chapel from Villain ties. This subtle weave tempers hierarchy's harshness. Interdependence softening inequality's bite. As twilight veils the orders, society exhales into rest. Castles quiet. Monasteries matins mute. Villages embers glow. The three estates, led like fertile soil, nurture history's slow bloom. Nobles dreaming conquests. Clergy visions. Peasants style at peace. Their intertwined breaths form night's gentle cradle, inviting yours to join this ancient harmony where roles resolve into shared slumber. Through the long centuries of the Middle Ages, the three estates, nobility who fight, clergy who pray, peasants who work, form the enduring skeleton of society, their roles interlocking like the stones of a cathedral arch, sustaining kingdoms amid the moral tempests of monarchs whose greed and cruelty ripple downward through fiefs, ties, and forays. Kings crowned the pyramid, parceling vast realms to dukes and counts for homage and knight service, while bishops and abbots intercede with prayers and absolutions, and serfs till open fields in three-field rotation to feed all levels, their weak works and boons funding wars and indulgences alike. This divine hierarchy, preached from pulpits and etched in chronicles, binds Europe from misty English manors to sun-baked Italian hill towns, where interdependence tempers inequality. Nobles shielding monasteries from raiders, clergy legitimizing thrones, laborious provisioning feasts and armies. Tonight, as our journey through shadowed courts, scriptoria, villages, and trade roads draws to its gentle close, we behold the full tapestry in twilight's hush, threads of power, faith, and toil weaving into night's profound rest. Nobility, the first estate, wields sword and scepter from birthright cradles, trained in cradles of war, boys to squires at 7, pages learning falconry and lute, dubbings at 21 with spades and blade. They patrol fiefs on destriers, tourneys clashing lances for honor and ransom. Duchesses and countesses oversee domains in husbands' absences, their seals on charters funding cloisters, marriages allying houses like Lincoln marrying Flanders wool to Aquitaine wine. Yet immoral kings like John extract scutage gold, pitting baron against crown in Runnymede fields, their feuds softening only in shared hunts where falcons stoop and horns win through autumn woods. Privileges flow, tax exemptions, private courts, but obligations bind, 40 days service, hospitality to travelers, justice in holes where reeves tally villain pleas. Clergy, second estate, spans from papal tiaras to parish stoops, the mitres mirroring thrones and influence. Popes thunder interdicts from Avignon palaces. Cardinals convene late-ran councils debating simony and crusade indulgences. Bishops, often noble-born, Crozier-in-handed minister sees rivaling counties, scriptoria illuminating equinas amid incense veils. Monks in Cistercian will drain marshes for granges. Friars preach poverty in market squares. Nuns copy psalters by tallow dips. Abbesses ruling like feudal ladies. Tithes tenth every sheaf and fleece sustain them. Prayers ascending for souls including tyrants like Philip jailing Boniface. Tensions where lay investitures clash with Gregorian reforms. Yet mutual need endures. Nobles charter abbeys for masses. Peasants seek absolution in wattled chapels. Peasants, third estate's vast sea. Anchor all with furrowed hands. Serfs bound to glebe pay Harriet ox on death. Merchant daughter marriage. Freeholders rent vergets cash, both rotating winter rye. Spring peas. Fallow graze under manorial courts where juries find weak ale or stray pigs. Dawn yokes oxen for domain plows. Women hoe gardens of kale and leeks. Children glean stubble. Harvest boons rush golden waves under watchful bailiffs, freshing flails echoing barns. Huts smoke pottage of barley and bacon, families huddling pallets against fleas, stories of saints chasing winter gales. Markets trade surplus eggs for salt, guilds blurring lines as burghers rise. Yet core remains, their sweat feeds nobility's tables, clergy's larders, king's campaigns. Intersections pulse daily life. Noble Michaelmas hunt share venison with village wakes. Bishops confirm peasant babes, knights endow chantries, merchants supply castle silks, friars absolve guild sins. Pilgrimages mingle, Canterbury roads throng dukes, monks, ploughmen chanting Hildegard. Corpus Christi plays cast knights as apostles, villains devils. Courts entwine, royal justices hear clerical appeals, manorial moots noble oversight, synods peasantide disputes. Festivals dissolve divides, carnival elects ploughman lord. Clergy blessing maypoles, nobles footing ring dances. Tensions weave shadows, nobles resenting royal summons. Clergy lay taxes, peasants extra tallages for ransoms. But theology quells, Adalbero's verses him orders divine. Paul the deacon versifying harmony. Black Death swells wages, guilds elevate merchants, universities spawn chancellors, yet estates persist. Chroniclers judging kings by estate duties. Richard lion-hearted fights well. Innocent pure prayer, laborious just toil. Women thread across, noble abbesses, merchant wives brewing, peasant spinners. Yet mobility rare save war widows inheriting, plague orphans apprenticed up. From champagne fairs where Italian bankers weigh wool for spices, to Baltic cogs hauling timber past pirate coasts. Trade oils the hierarchy, kings chartering staples for tolls funding French wars. Guild halls feast masters over minstrel lays, apprentices dreaming masterpieces. Villages breathe resilience, almonry bred from tithes, lordly famine aid, church masses for dead. As centuries tane, from Charlemagne's caroling dawns to Plantagenet pageants, Hohenstaufen hubris to Valois velvets, the estates endure, weathering Mongols, Reconquista, 100 years strife. Immoral monarchs, Pedro's rages, John's perfidies, cast long shades. Yet web holds, knights muster, monks pray, peasants sow universities birth scholastics blurring lines, crusades mingle blood, trade towns burger kings. Twilight gathers now over this vast canvas. Castles torches wink, monasteries vespers hush, villages hearths ember glow. Kings dream conquests, nobles tourney scars, clergy visions divine, peasants starlit peace, breath sinking in night's cradle. The tapestry folds gently, moral storms stilled, estates resolved into eternal harmony. Cloister garths quiet, monks' habits whispering compline paths, village lanes empty, shutters closed on pottage pots. Rivers murmur under bridges, fields silvered by moon, owls calling estates to slumber. Huts doors bar, families pallet huddled, embers banked against dawn plow. In this final hush, the Middle Ages exhale, kings, warlords, queens, chroniclers, merchants, peasants, all yielding to time's gentle tide. Let the ancient rhythms, sword sheathed, psalms stilled, forays rested, carry you now, breath easing, eyelids descending, into sleep's vast manor where states dissolve, souls equal under heaven's impartial stars. Rest deep in history's woven arms, the twilight complete,